body to this webinar under the name Facing Urbicide, Spatial Reshaping and Practices of Resistance in the 1967 Occupied Palestinian Territories. It's part of the Urbicide series of Mada al-Carmel, the research center in Haifa, Palestine, and with the aid of Ernest Foundation.
That the seminar is available translated in English, so anyone listening to us who does not understand Arabic can listen to the translation channel, and we will say a few notes about that later.
Previous sessions of the seminar approached Urbicide as an ongoing colonial process that reshapes space and daily life, impacting the conditions of survival and the possibilities of continuing within the Palestinian city. The starting point of the series was the Gaza Strip as the site of the most intense and visible manifestation of contemporary Urbicide. It then moved to different Palestinian geographies, from Palestinian refugee camps as spaces of continual displacement and the reproduction of life under colonial violence, to post-Nakba Palestinian cities, asking questions related to time, rupture, and the remaking of the rebuilding of the building of the urban space. In the fourth session, we return to the 1967 Occupied Palestinian Territories, especially to cities in the West Bank, to approach Urbicide from a different perspective and pose fundamental questions such as how do Palestinian cities resist ongoing processes of erasure, and what forms of survival and life reproduction emerge within the colonized city. The session focuses on the mechanisms of everyday resistance that arise within the Palestinian urban space through spatial reproduction, the preservation of memory, livelihood sustaining networks, housing practices, and continued despite conditions of colonial depletion and control. Speakers in our meeting, Dr. Hanin Amni, a Palestinian writer and researcher that concentrates on Jerusalem after the Nakba, and specifically 1948 and 1967. She has the doctorate PhD from MSc, and she also aids and publishes in Al-Quds magazine. She will talk with us when we will open Damascus Gate, how Jerusalem reshaped its center after the Nakba. Lana Juda is a Ramallah-based architect and researcher, and she worked in Beirut from 2016 to 2024, and before that she worked many years in Riwa organization on the issues of rebuilding
والإنتاج الثقافي، وتركز اهتماماتها على تاريخ البيئات العمرانية في فلسطين. وستقدم
Lana Judy will give prior to this she worked for several years at Riwa historic centers. Her academic and professional experience reaches the fields of architecture, urban studies, and culture, with a particular focus on the historical trajectories of Palestine built rooms. Ranima Yad, an architect and researcher who studies the history of social transformations and their relationship to the built environment in Palestine and its surroundings. She holds a bachelor's degree in architecture from Beirut University and is doctoral in the John Copernicus program of anthropology and women's gender and sexuality studies at the Yale University, USA. Dr. Ibrahim Kitanlast, an Palestinian academic architect, and he's a postdoctoral researcher at Tampere University, Finland, and the assistant professor of the Department of Architectural Engineering and Planning at Beirut. He received a PhD from KU Leuven from Belgium in 2020, and he is co-founder of Yalla Project in Nablus, an interdisciplinary research initiative that works to regenerate urban space through participatory practice. And Abdulrahman will talk about Elaine that does know of never-ending alley, and it is alleyway, the old city of Nablus, and practices of survival resistance by Dr. Abdulrahman Kattani. And I am Faik Me'ar, assistant professor of the Department of Architecture, Engineering and Planning at Beirut University. We want to remind the people that you can write your questions and your discussions in the Q&A, and we will discuss the questions in the last discussion. We would like to remind the speakers and our speakers and guests that there is English interpretation and you can choose
وبإمكانكم
the
مشاركة المزيد من
interpretation option,
التعليقات في الشات.
and you can find the
كما نود
details of how
بالتنويه أيضا
to
إلى أن هذه
have
الجلسة مسجلة
to hear the
وسيكون لها
translation
تسجيل لاحقا
in
على قناة
the chat.
اليوتيوب وعلى منصات
I
التواصل
would like to
الاجتماعي
remind
ومن
everybody
هذا
that this
نكمل
session is
باللغة
recorded in
الإنجليزية.
Arabic, and it will
فأهلا
be
وسهلا
posted to
بالجميع
YouTube of Mad
مجددا
al-Carmel,
وأهلا
YouTube,
بالمشاركين
Mad al-Carmel
ونأمل
YouTube
أن
channel
يكون
in
لقاء
English and
غني
Arabic. So welcome everybody,
وأغنى
and we hope it will be a very special and enriching and fulfilling discussion.
نبدأ بالترتيب مش
So
كده؟
welcome. So we're gonna go by,
نبدأ مع
we're
حنين.
gonna start with Haneen.
تفضل.
Here you go.
شكرا سلامات للجميع.
Thank you. Hi, welcome everybody, and thank you for participating. And thank you, Hamad, for organizing this webinar. Today, I will be talking about the Jerusalem between 1948 and 67, the Raleigh Document Historic 30, and how the Palestinian city outside the neighborhoods outside the wall, which were annexed to Jordan. Jerusalem we're talking about, it's what's known as Jerusalem, the Arab Jerusalem. That means the eastern neighborhoods that Israel did not um, occupy in 1948, and that continued the old city and the next neighboring neighborhoods, Silwan and etc. We can see that this area is very small compared to the Jerusalem municipal borders during the mandatory era. These places were under the Jordanian monitor under the Jordanian rule in 1667. There's a lot to say about the Jordanian role in Jerusalem, the role Jordan played in Jerusalem and the West Bank, but in Jerusalem there was always a lot of partition between relations between Jerusalem and Hanak, its position, and of course it's the issue of out. But today I'm not going to talk about the issue of its development and money allocations, etc. But today I'll be talking about the constitutive yet well-documented history of Arab Jerusalem and the struggle to rebuild the city after the Nakba. The Palestinian people of the city were not, they were very active in managing the city and rebuilding its economy and its organizations and its urban position. Though the Nakba have put many limitations, and because
وهذا بحد ذاته فعل مؤسس للهوية السياسية الفلسطينية في هذه السنوات. كما تظهر الخريطة القدس بتلك الفترة
as Jerusalem at that time has become partitioned, as you can see between the city in the blue that was under Israeli occupation and the city that was under Jordanian rule, and there was a partition between them which was no man's land. It also became, there was also another border, what was called بوابة وندلبوم border crossing. The losing of the western city of the war made a lot of losses, gave a lot of losses to the territories of Jordan. And many of the services that were centered in the western part of the city that has become under the Israeli occupation. Therefore, the Arab city, therefore the brown partition, had many political and cultural and architectural projects that rebuilt the city and reshaped it and brought a lot of the neighborhoods in the city, starting from Bab al-Ammud, Damascus Gate, and Salahuddin Street, various social.
في الوقت المتبقي رح نقوم
In the
بجولة
remaining,
التنفس الجديدة
in the upcoming time, we're gonna go through a journey into what became the new city center of Arab Jerusalem after the Nakba, starting from Bab al-Amud, Damascus Gate, through the main street leading to Bab al-Sahiri, Herod's Gates, and Salahuddin Street. I will start from Bab al-Amud, Damascus Gate, and Hebron Gate, that became one of the biggest. After the partition of the city, Bab al-Amud has become very close to
يغلق في السنوات الأولى لأسباب أمنية. كون هاي المنطقة
during the early years after the Nakba, it was closed because of security reasons. One of
لغاية سنة 48
under
فإغلاق باب العمود
the closure of
النشاط الاقتصادي بشكل
Damascus Gate made significant losses to the economic status, and therefore there was a need to rebuild and reconstruct this economic center, and the Palestinian authorities demanded a lot in this center. It was located in the new city. In their own words, the municipality
باب العمود وشريان حيوي لما تبقى من المدينة مطالبا بإعادة بنائه.
The most popular area of the old city was and still is the main entrance. The partition was just to the no man's land and Amster's border. Therefore, it closer paralyzed the life commercial zone. It used to be as it housed up until two markets. The center became the periphery, and it was need to revive the center or to create a new one became crucial for the local economy, according to the municipality, pleaded with the Jordanian government and security. In August 1948, Palestinian newspaper called "When Do You Open Bab al-Ammu?" published an article titled "When Do You Open It?" The article explained that the need to open the gate was not only because it consisted of the artery of the sin. Further, at first, Bab al-Amud was open until 7 and in the evening, but was gradually further extended until 9, as local newspapers announced at the end of February 1950 due to its imminent arrival of pilgrims from around the world. Commercial movement bloomed, as well as other professions, including doctors, pharmacists, and photographers, who opened their or located their shops and clinics to the area after the Nakba and were highly attended by the public. Certainly also required connectivity within the city and beyond in order to keep. But there are certain centrality as it's at the center of city shifted. In 1950, the Palestinian newspaper talked about the coffee shop comings who were smoking shisha from morning to night. That gave the business owners to organize the use of the use of the center as
حول كيفية إدارة واستخدام المجال العام. في السنوات اللاحقة تغير شكل.
In the upcoming years, the use of Bab al-Amud have changed and shifted in different shapes. This is a picture from the 1950s as it become a parking lot. And that's a photo is from the 70s. During these times, the centrality of Bab al-Amud and its boomed commercial was also required connectivity within the city and beyond it in order to keep the center alive. At that time, those traveling by buses to Jerusalem were dropped off at various and remote stops in the margins of the city and under rain and under the sun. Therefore, the municipality, the Arab municipality of Arab Jerusalem, established a modern bus terminal, which was opened in May 1957 near Bab al-Amud, and it served lines within both the west and the east bank of Jordan and with other Arab countries, and that's very important. Because there was lost connectivity with the coastal cities and the connectivity through the sea. From the central bus terminal, we walk through Bab al-Sahiri, Herod's Gates. During the time Bab al-Amud was struggling to retain its centrality as it was shut down, the center of the city shifted eastwards, away from the Ramses Shrine towards the area of Bab al-Sahiri, Herod's Gate. Up until late 1914, this area was not considered a commercial zone given by the British Mandate planning scheme. Yet, It has become after the war as the beating heart of the city,
إغلاق باب العمود
as it was
وأيضا
described in the press, given in relative distance from the border, and the closure of Bab
مع
el-Amoud,
توسع المنطقة
Damascus Gate, and the
تزايد
establishment
خطر
of the
الاستهداف
governmental
وتطويرها.
departments over
في
there.
مطلع سنة
As the area
1850
developed,
قدم
so in
مؤلف
the early
الهاتف الأنقاضي
1950s,
طلب
only
من البلدية
many
تحويل المنطقة إلى منطقة تجارية
owners
تسمح
of
بإقامة العمليات
property over there
الاقتصادية. هذا المطلب
asked
لم
the
يكن
municipality to
اقتصادي
open
فقط،
also
بل ذا بعد سياسي تخطيطي أيضا.
petitioned the
طالبت
municipality
حل
demanding the
نفس
consideration of the area as a commercial zone to allow them to establish businesses. That particularly demanded to serve as policy dedicated to former mandate Attorney General Norman Bentwich and demanded to render it a commercial area in order to resist, assist and resistance to forces, a matter which the national interest assertive. This demand highlighted the fact that the legacy of the mandate and the consequences of the war were not limited to destruction and displacement, but also included legal and political restrictions over the use of public space and who may use of public space. So it became an organizational and municipal area, and they put
واعتبرتها معلم تاريخي يستلزم الحماية والحفظ. لذلك إعادة تشكيل
therefore the reshaping of the center of the city in Herod's Gate after 48 and its area and the area of Salah ad-Din Street and making it a commercial center, you can look at it as going over the non-centrality and the city is regaining its leadership and management of the city over the public space. Of course, many or some of while particular groups were able to keep some of their capital and property to carry out economic enterprises in the partitioned city, other groups, including poor residents and the private refugees, had to find their way through the destroyed economy. Thus, the city witnessed the rise or revival of poor economies that depended on minimal or no capital to produce profit. One such economy was increased use of gaps in the walls of the old city near the main gates.
من أبرزها استغلال ثغرات كانت موجودة في السور بمنطقة باب العمود وباب الساهري لوضع أكشاك صغيرة لبيع سلع بسيطة. وهذه الأكشاك
One such economy was the increasing use of gaps in the walls of the old city near the main gates, Bab el-Amoud and Bab el-Sahira, Herod's Gate and Damascus Gate, where poor vendors could set up booths to sell basic goods. Given the economic destitution and while Salah ad-Din Street was not a central economic place as before 1948, it had become after 1948 it had become a center after 1948, and it had became the host of 4 newspapers and many libraries and bookshops, and 11 gaps were and it extended to the Sheikh Jarrah, where the street would become the main commercial and central hub for Arab Jerusalem and the landmark of that era, although in 1948 it was no more than a narrow street. For example, we can say that in 1965 there were near Bab al-Amoud, Damascus Gate, and the places of worship. Before there were many vendors who commissioned or partitioned to the city against the in 19 روحي الخطيب, the last mayor of Arab Jerusalem in 1948
هذه الجمعية أنشأت فندق الزهراء وعدد آخر من الفنادق.
was a pioneer, and he established
أنشأت جمعية
the El Zahra Hotel and the El Zahra, and in the El Zahra Street, Al Khatib, Farmer
جاء تأسيسه في وقت لم تكن فيه
the Arab
أي
Hotels
مناطق عرب
Association.
في القدس العربية.
The association established the first economic project in Jerusalem after the Nakba, Al Zahra Hotel, initially to serve journalists and military correspondents who regularly visited the city during that time, as no hotels were located in the area of Arab Jerusalem in 1948. The importance of this this hotel was a lot bigger, especially that it aided in developing the tourism and reshaping the city as an international center. And further that, in 1950, he managed to reopen the airport that was established by the British Mandate and named it as Jerusalem Airport. And that regained the city's economic and commercial center and enabled it to be a central Arabic point, bigger than its place as a central city, and therefore that brought the Arabs from around the world to understand and to discover the city as a city of refugees, a city waiting for the return. That's one picture to show how Jerusalem was connected via flights to different cities. I would like to end with this. I would like to conclude this with the hotel managed to network of charges that were particularly active in the supporting city. In a year after the Nakba, the many of the wounded has managed to organize themselves as an organization, and this organization managed to establish itself in the society, elected its advisory council in 1949, which included, among others, Arif al-Arif, Abdullah al-Khatib, and Al-Hajj Ali al-Masri, an expert in shaping artificial organs. As mentioned, the society had a party in the newly opened Al-Zahra Hotel in order to resolution. The orchestra of the Arab army and some local singers performed a highly attended party, which lasted for a few hours. The Palestinian newspaper reported proved the extent of which the public's preparation, the wounded and disabled fighters, and their sacrifice for the homeland. These projects show that the Arab Jerusalem was not just a city facing the Nakba implications, but also a lively space that managed to rebuild the city, though the losses in everywhere and every side. Through all this, the Arab Jerusalem experience calls us to understand the Nakba within a historic center that was not only concerned with the loss, but also with the rebuilding of the Palestinian life, and reshaping history, the future. Thank you. Thank you, Haneen. We're going now to the second presentation because of Ranim and Lena. There you go. Thank you.
شكرا فايق على التقديم، شكرا همت وقائمين على سلسلة.
Thank you, Faik and Himmat and everybody responsible for the webinars. I think today what I'm showing me and Ranim is connected to what Haneen has managed. Me and Ranim worked between 2021 and 2023 on
وكان هدفنا توثيق وتحليل طبقة.
We wanted to analyze part of the new city of which was one road called Nazlet al-Barid, the post road that was
وطرز معمارية حداثية
played a role in the Palestinian life and included many. It helped us to understand the new
ساعدتنا على الانفتاح على أسئلة أوسع من عمران الشارع نفسه. في البحث وثقنا مباني عناصر عمرانية
in the construction of different buildings. We have managed to document many historic events and buildings and architectural buildings and connected Ramallah with bigger cultural networks, as Hanin has talked, that Hanin mentioned, as Jerusalem and its surrounding. So these these networks connected Ramallah with Jerusalem and United States and Kuwait and Amman and Jordan. This change in 1950, transformation in the 50s and 60s, managed to transform Ramallah and El-Biri, and of course it's part of the Jerusalem network, as a new network, a political and cultural network that continued to exist and develop after 67. We're gonna take you in a small
نزلة البريد للربط مع هاي الأفكار مع أخذ بعين الاعتبار أن التركيز في هذا العرض على المدينة.
We should take into consideration that we are talking about the city in the end of the cities of Ramallah. We're concentrating on Ramallah, but we are also gonna touch on the El-Biri city, the role of El-Biri city, the neighboring city, which has become more involvement and became more involved after 1967 and the establishment of the Palestinian Authority.
وأكيد الدراسة اللي عم
Ramallah, the urban life after the Nakba. We'll take also about the works of Hanin and Ilan Pape and Johnny Mansour about Nablus, and it helps us to see how the loss managed to get
آلاف المهجرين وصلوا لرام وكمان البيرة
the bereavement has managed to get many of the people the refugees became part of the refugee camps in El-Biri, refugee camp El-Biri, which was established by Al-Mura and Musbah and Qaddura refugee camps in Ramallah that were unofficial, and of course another refugee camps, Al-Jalazon and etc. The people that were able on the business side and financial side lived in neighborhoods of Ramallah and El-Biri, and most of the Christian refugees remained in the city of Ramallah. Between 1948 and 53, the Ramallah entity or texture of the city has changed. The political and more than 65% of the citizens were refugees from the cities of Jaffa, Ramle, Lod, and the area, different villages of the coast. We're talking about 60% of the city population who were refugees from within the city limits. And we're talking about more than 2,500 citizens who were living abroad, mainly in the United States. Therefore, Ramallah has taken in a lot of refugees who rebuilt their life and their businesses and started a new
وهذا التداخل الفريد لعب دور كبير في هوية المدينة بعد النكبة.
A new class within the city. Ramallah in the mid 1920 in the mid 20th century, it was part of the refugatory element who became part of the class, the Ramallah class. The same as happened in Nazareth and which was under one of the studies done by Hanin. Maryam Zanoun, one of the citizens from Allah, talks about it. She says the abnormal increase of the population shook the town to its foundations. Accommodations had to be increased, thus many buildings went up. were built.
تزايد أعداد
The big number
المستهلكين
of consumers
تحت
caused more
الإنتاج
business stores
والمراهقة
to
من
be
قبل
opened mostly by the
اللاجئين
refugees themselves.
وكان لابد من معالجة
Shortage
نقص
of
المياه
water had to
ففي
be dealt with.
أحد فصول
In
الصيف
one summer,
انجفت معظم
when
خزانات
most of the
تجمع مياه الأمطار
cisterns went dry,
بيعت صفيحة
a
الماء
tin
مقداره
of water
ال
equivalent of 4
$4
gallons
ب14
was
سنت
sold for the equivalent of 14 cents. The need for
بيعت
water,
بمعادل 14 سنت ودفعت الحاجة الماسة إلى
the need
الماء
for water
البلدية وسكان
made
المدينة
the
إلى العمل
municipality and
بجد
the people
ونجحوا
of
في نهاية
town
المطاف
set to work,
في
and
ربط
finally they were
رام الله
successful in
بشبكة
connecting
مياه
Ramallah
القدس
with the water supply of Jerusalem, the
صعب
water network
نرسم
of
صورة
Jerusalem.
كاملة عن الحياة
We
الحضرية
can't
في رام الله بعد
try
النكبة
to show
بس
you
اللاجئين عادوا تشكيل
a
يعني
full
حياتهم
photo
في
or a
المدينة
full
وهم عبر
picture
الجبال
of
في مهيرات
the
والاعتزال
life of
واستكمال التعليم
Ramallah,
كمان للعب أدوار
but
جديدة
they managed to bring
مستثمر
many
التجار الصناعية
the
المزارعين
businessmen
المهاجرين استثمر
and
أموالهم في مشاريع بناء
the
وتجارة حوالين المنابع
the businessmen, the
بالأخير صارت
different
تعني مركز المدينة
refugees, the
الرئيسية
different also
هذا
farmers
التلاقي بين الأهالي
put their money
واللاجئين
and
جلب
invested
تنافس
near
واستخدامات
the
وعمل
Manara
محلية مشترك وفي توسيع
square,
السكن
which
بطريقة
managed
توصل
to
لأدت
develop,
لتشكيل
to
مشهد
expand the
عمراني إلى
developments and
جانب
started
نمو ثقافة الاصطياف والسياحة اللي خلت رام الله وجهة سياحية بارزة
this also turned
بالخمسينات
also
والستينات
Ramallah a touristic
قبل فترة كان في منشور لصيدلية
goal or
السيد اللي
touristic
قريبة من
place.
المنارة عن مؤسسها أحمد
That is a
السيد
post from Sayed
مذكور معهم
Pharmacy
بالتاريخ العلمي وواحد
on
من
their
الأمثلة اللي
post.
بتشرح هذا
They
الشيء
remember one
هو
of the examples for that.
تهجر
So his
من
family
دجان
was
بيافا كمل
became
تعليمه
refugees
في
from
جامعة
Dajan village in
بيروت
Jaffa.
ورجع
He
وأخذ
continued his
أدوار
work in
في
the American
أوروبا
University in Beirut, and
بعدين ودرس طبعا
then he
كمان
managed
حجاب
to get a
وبعدين صار
job at the
بقية
UNRWA,
السنين
and he
لاحقة نائب رئيس بلدية
became
رام
later
بعد
the
سنتين فقط من
vice
النكبة
mayor of Ramallah.
تأسست الغرفة
2
التجارية
years after
للأجسام
the
والفلسطين
Nakba
وانتقلت
in
منظمة البريد
1950,
62 الصحف بأوائل الخمسينات
Chamber of
وبتوثق
Commerce was
تجارب
established
الاتحادية
and
في
went to
مشاريع العمل
Nazlat al-Barid
الحر
in
والإنتاجية
1960s.
للمجتمع المحلي
And we can
مثل
see in many of the
افتتاح أول
programs
مدرسة
as
مدنية
the
ثانوية للبنات
establishment of the
52
first
في المسجد
governmental
الكبير
school
كلية
for
المعلمات ب 53 مكتبة
female
رام الله
students
الآن ب 57
in
أول مستشفى
1960s.
عام
The
بالمستشفى
first
الرئيسية ب 61 شق
hospital
شوارع
in
ضبط شوارع
Ramallah,
جديدة تأسيس
any
نوادي
different
ثقافية ورياضية وحصول
establishment
كمان
of
على
cultural
حقوق من
and
الحكومة الأردنية
sports clubs, and
للرجال
also getting some
الوقائع الحضرية هاي الجديدة بعد النكبة طبعا تفاعلت مع سياقات اقتصادية واجتماعية محلية كانت موجودة في
credits or
المنطقة
loans
في
from the
عملية
different
صون صارمة
Jordanian
لهاي
government.
العلاقات الاجتماعية
Geographical
والمحلية
connectivity and
خلال النكبة
discussions and flows
في
between
كتير
Ramallah
وجد
and its
دراسات
surroundings.
عن
Many
رام
studies
الله
about
ساعدتنا
Ramallah.
كيف مرت رام الله ببداية
There's a lot of them that
الترشيح
help
ونهاية
us
القرن
understand
العاشر
what happened to Ramallah and
ومواجهات
how it
متكررة
transformed
من
from the
الانفتاح
1950,
مع عوالم جغرافية
19, the beginning
وثقافية
of the 20th century
والانقطاع
to the end of the
عن
20th
أي
century.
تهديدات محيطة إلى جانب هجرة سكانها وعودة بعضهم
In addition
استقبالها
to
اللاجئين
the
بس كمان الوافدين من القرى كمان السائحين في منتصف القرن العشرين هذا
to the
كله
immigration of
أوجد
many citizens
طبقات
from the
جديدة
village to
اجتماعية
outside of
واقتصادية
Ramallah, and
وسياسية
hijr and immigration from the villages to inside Ramallah,
بالنصف
which established
الثاني من
different
القرن
new
الثالث
classes,
عشر
different classes
استقبال رام
and
الله
commercial and
الرئيسي
business
للإرساليات
classes.
الدينية
And
ومؤسسات تعليمية
from the
ربوية ومادية وانخراط
1920s, we can see
وانخرط
many
بعضهم كمان
Ramallah,
دخول أبناء من أبنائها في اقتصاد
how
الحج
many of
هاجرت
the
عائلاتهم
citizens
للولايات
of
المتحدة
Ramallah immigrated
تقريبا
to the
نهاية
United
القرن
States,
التاسع
and many of
عشر
them
غير
worked in the
النفطية
Hajj
وموجات
of
الهجرة
the
اللي صارت
Christians
في
to
شرق
the cities of
الجبل والصعيد
Jerusalem.
من لبنان
The many
لسوريا
immigration
وكل هذا خلق
that
تدفقات بشرية ومالية قبل النكبة يعني في فورة بناء مثلا صارت بين الحربين العالميتين برام الله بسبب استثمار أموال المغتربين في مباني سكنية وأعمال تجارية في البلدة بعد قدرتهم على إرسال الأموال مرة جديدة بعد انتهاء الحرب العالمية الأولى وكان في تعليم الأبناء شراء أراضي في الساحل
the building
والقدس
revolutions that saw in
وكمان
Ramallah
يعني
and the
عائلات ميسورة
buying of
حولت
different,
البلدة
and
لمقصد لاصطياف للنخب
many
الساحل
of
والقدس
the
وخطط للنكبة
influential
وبين
families
هذا
and
بالتوصيل هذا
wealthy families turned the
المكان
city
السياحي
as
للقدس بعد النكبة
a
أبناء المدينة حصلوا على شهادات
as a
محلية
summer
تعليم
vacation
عالية بس
destination
كمان في مغتربين
of
رجعوا بشهادات من
giving
الخارج
Ramallah a touristic
وأتاح
and
لوظائف
very commercial
حكومية في
position.
الحكومة الانتدابية والمؤسسات
That's a
التعليمية
picture of Ramallah in the
وفي نخبة
1940s.
محلية كانت
And there's
مرتبطة بالحراك
also
الحضري في
an
الفترة
elite that was
قبل
also
النكبة
an elite class that
شارك أحد
was part
الموجة
of the
قبل النكبة بالتبرع بعملات
Jerusalem's
الأراضي
cultural
والتطوير
and
البلدي
political scene. and also the citizens of Ramallah who immigrated to abroad also aided by giving up money to the city, by helping different organizations for schools, for
الوطنية من مع خليل أبو ريا بال47 مثل باقي مدن
scouts
المقاطعة
or
الوسطى
different sects.
مقاطعة
As the
رمالة
same,
بالتنمية
Ramallah in
الآن ذات
1948 was
الساحلي
disconnected
لكن في
from
المقابل
the
فتحت أكثر على
coastal
الأردن والعالم
connection, but
العربي
on the other side, it was
وتصل
open
في
more to
الخمسينات والستينات
the
هذا
Jordan and the Arab the Arab community,
وهذا
becoming in the 1950s
الانفتاح للسياحة
as
الداخلية
a vacation
بالأخير أكيد كان في
destination,
توجهات
summer
من
vacation
الأردن
destination. Of
وإله
course,
ضمن
there
كل
was
هذا
a
الاستفادة
Jordanian
من
government involvement
المواقع
after,
السياحية وخصوصا الدينية في الضفة
especially
الغربية
for benefiting from the
كجزء من الاقتصاد الأردني بس كمان في نخبة اقتصادية محلية مؤسساتية واجتماعية محلية
touristic sites,
ساهمت في هذا الإشي.
cultural
ومنها
and
شاف فرصة لصعود طبقي ضمن اقتصاد ليبرالي بيشبه كتير اللي صار في
religious
لبنان مثلا
sites.
ومنه اللي شافوا نشاط
Some of them consider that
ثقافي وجماهيري وجغرافي
a class
بشكل
action
طبعا
similar to what's happening in Lebanon, and
طبعا
also
هاي
some
الحقبة
consider
استمرت
it cultural
بال67 اللي بعديها
sites
قطع هذا
that continue
الامتداد
to the
الجغرافي
1970s
للضفة وضم
when
رام الله
it was the
وأدى
disconnected
لانهيار هاي الصناعة المعتمدة على السياح كانت من المدن العربية
as it was disconnected and
مع
breaking
الانقطاع
off,
مر بفترة عن
severed
إعزال
this
الضفة
connection
الغربية
between
وانفتاحها
its
مرة تانية
geographical
على الداخل
abundance and
الفلسطيني
opening
بنشوف كيف
towards the
رام الله
inside of
وجبتها
Palestine
البير وبيرزيت
1948
كمان
lands. We
تحولوا
see how Ramallah,
لواحد
Bir
من
Zayt, and El
مراكز
Biri
التعليم
became
العالي
some
وإنتاج
of the
الطبقة
most
الوسطى
important
بالضفة
higher education centers in
هلا
the
واحدة
West
من أهم
Bank.
استنتاجاتنا كانت
And
إنه التحديث
one of
المبكر
our
بالقرن
realizations
العشرين
became that the
لعب دور
absorbing
كبير في
shocks
بلورة هذا الحراك الاجتماعي
and
والثقافي والسياسي
has
بعد
played a very
النكبة
important role
والفاعلية اللي
after the
تشكلت
Nakba, and
يعني بعد النكبة
meaning
مع
after the
فئات
Nakba,
مجتمعية جديدة كانت كمان
with the
أساس
new
للفاعلية بعد احتلال العدوان
community and
بال67 من خلال
society
كل
sectors
الأنشطة
became
للنقابات
part
والاتحادات
of very
ومؤسسات
important
العمل
after
الدولية
67 with the
وهذا كله اعتمد
different
على تعدد
organizations
وتنوع
and
الفاعلية السياسية والاقتصادية والمجتمعية بين أطر أهلية وبنى مؤسساتية
different unions.
وعلى مرونة بدمج العمل التنموي والإغاثي والخدمي بمستويات مختلفة مع القدرة على امتصاص الصدمات وتحويلها لأنماط من
with the
التنظيم
opportunity to
والفاعلية الحضرية.
I'm sorry, I
مشهد
missed
رام الله
her.
بعد النكبة
The Ramallah after the
يعني
Nakba
بيكشف عن
so
حالة من الانفتاح
shows
وشيء
in
بنستعيره
a
من
situation
أحد
of
الدراسات الحضرية اللي هو نفاذية حضارية أو urban
openness
porosity
or urban
اللي سمحت
porosity as
بدخول
it's
فئات وأنماط
called
حضارية جديدة
that
من خلال الساحل
opened
والقدس يعني رام الله
different
ما
classes to
كانت قرية
come or
غنية
different
مثل يافا أو
from
حيفا بس
Jerusalem to
بالأخير أصبحت
Ramallah.
المجال
Ramallah wasn't cosmopolitan as
لتشكلات
Jaffa or
اجتماعية سياسية
Haifa,
واقتصادية
but it
جديدة
opened
وهاي
this,
النفاذية
gave an
بنشوف إنه
openness
حدت هذا الفصل
to
الصارم للنظام
open to
الاجتماعي
some different
والمكاني
classes to
وطبعا
come in.
بدون أي تقليل من شأن كل الاعتبارات الهويتية والتوترات كمان اللي بتصير بهيك حالة من عشائرية وطبقية ودينية وسياسية على هذا النتاج الحضري. رح نمشي معكم سريعا على مواقع في نزلة البريد
Without downplaying the
وعند
tribal and
بوجري
class
شاب
tensions between, we're gonna
دار
continue
ومنطقة
now
إدارية تحت نهاية
to
الشارع
from Rukab
وفي
ice
وسطه
cream to
تقريبا
Nazlat al
بريد
Barid to the
المدينة
down city, and in the
اللي
middle the
صار بعد
postal office
احتلال
of the city. What
67
happened in
مكان
1967 has
لتسليم
become
استلام
a
الرواتب
place
للموظفين
of getting
والموظفين
paid
ذاك الاستخدام صار
and
أوبن
salary
طوابير
payment for
الموظفين المصطفى
different
للنزول للبريد من هيك اسمها
workers,
نزلة
and
البريد طبعا هذا تحليلنا مع إنه اسم
we think it's
الرسمي
called
هو
Nazlat al Barid, the
محاذاة
down
للشارع
way of
المنتزه
the
لأنه الشارع
post,
يبدو إنه
because
مصمم ليكون الممشى والمتنزه
that's how
للجهود
it's called by
الحضرية
the people, because they
وشارع
would go
بالأخص في ناحية
down
أبرار
the street to get
القطب
paid
المشرقي اللي ما كانت
their
مش
salary
موجودة
every month.
في مكان
But
تاني
it's
بتصير
called
نشاطات
the
يعني
Muntaza
تقديرنا
Street,
لهاي الأسباب
the Park Street, or
هذا
if you
هو
want,
المشهد في صيف
or so
61
this is the
هذا
area in
الشارع
19
الرئيسي اللي هو
in the
شارع
summer of
ركاب فيه
1966,
مقهى
the
وحديقة
main
الركاب
street
على الرصيف
Rukab, where you have coffee
ومقابل
shop of
محل
Rukab
البوظة
on the
هذا
sideway
مفهوم مجلة
walk
العربية
next
الكويتية
in
إجت
front
وعملت
of the ice
تقرير ب
cream
61 عن مدينة الكويت
shop.
العربية
It's
مقطع
by
وحديقة
a
ركاب
newspaper from
بيستذكرها
Kuwait
مريد
that
البرغوثي خلال زيارته
Murid al-Barghouthi
للمدينة
remembers
من قرية
the visit of the
غسان
Sisi
أمام
from his village
المقابر
Der Ghassan while he was
المنزوحة
a
بال67
young man.
فبقول
That's before
لم تلاحقني
1967, and he
عيون
says,
فضولية أبداً
while
ورغم
walking
إنه
towards Rukab's
طبعاً
Cafe
حكيت
and
لك
garden,
شو
I was
دايماً
never
الصغار
stalked
يلي متناولة
with
شو
nosy looks, teenage girls and boys have chocolate mousse, peach malba, milkshakes and banana split in the shadows of its beautiful trees and its ground covered in white pebbles.
لتحت شوي بنشوف وحدة
If you
من
go a little bit downwards, you can see one of the inner areas
الخارجية المشجرة
or
المرتبطة
the
بثقافة التنزه
trees, the
والترفيه
green
في رمضان
spaces
قبل
that
النكبة
is connected
اللي
to
هي
the
الأشجار
culture
السرو
of our going
والصنوبر
outside, the culture
مريد
of
برغوثي نفسه
traveling
بسميها
outside.
رام الله السرو والصنوبر
Murid Barghouti calls
في
it
هاي المنطقة
Ramallah
تحديداً في
al-Saru
شارع البرازيل
was-Sanobar, which is the cypress and pine of Ramallah. And it's connected to the openness and
anyway في
the
وحدة من المناطق أو الشارع
amusement
في منطقة
culture in the
فيها
city. One of the areas
كمان
that
شمشون
is very
بيستخدمها
highly
لاستراحة قصيرة تحت هاي
is
الأشجار
very highly
الخارجية
forested.
خلال رحلة
He
اللجوء
remembers
إلى هناك
in
خلال رحلة
this
اللجوء
forested
لهناك
area
سنة 48
also in
بعد
1948
تفجير
when then
بعدين
where they
رملة
were
بعدين
became
نابلس
refugees
ولطرون
from
ورملة
Haifa and
وصاروا
to
بيرزيت
Ramle, then to
كمان
Latrun
اللي
and
درس
Ramallah
تربية
until
رياضية
they came
بجامعة بيرزيت
to
المنقود بيرجع
Birzeit
بالثمانينات
newspaper.
واستأجر
And
شقة
even
بمدينة
the person
البريد
who
وما زال
studied,
عايش فيها هلا
who
ثقافة
taught
البناء
in
والتجهيز
Birzeit
بدأت في
University
رام الله
returned to
بالثلاثينات
Ramallah
لاستمرار
and
سياحة
نزلت
الاستيراد بعد
البريد
انهيار
road to
النكبة
rent a
لسوريا
house there
وسكن
that continued
العائلات
to live there.
اللاجئة
So
الجديدة
the area became
اللي
a
تمركزت
place
حوالين
where
منصة
many of the
الإنجازات
refugee
الرياضية أيضا
cities
تسجيل مهم لسكان
became
نزلة
citizens of the
المحافظات
area. Therefore, a
الجديدين
new
من
class of
عائلات
citizens became there
موظفة
from
والتوتسي
families that came as refugees
مبنى
from
البريد في وحدة
Jerusalem, from
البريد
Jaffa, and
أحدث
from
الحكومة
Jaffa from
الأردنية
Lod.
في 66
The
كمركز
postal
رئيسي
office
للخدمة المالية
1966 was opened in
تحت إدارة
1966 by
الدكتور
the
أحدح
was
مهاجر
under the management
مغربي
of Tufik
اللي
Dadah,
حصل
one
ب
of the
58 على
refugees from
دبلوم
Lod, and
البريد
who
العالمي
managed to
من
get
اتحاد البريد
the
العالمي في
diploma
القاهرة
of
وأسس
high postal diploma issued by
ساعد
the
في
Arab
تأسيس
Postal Union
وإدارة
in
عدد من
1958.
مراكز
And
البريد
he helped
حوالين رام الله
establish
قبل ما
many of
يستلم
postal offices
المركز
in
الرئيسي
around Ramallah
اللي هو
before
تبعه في
taking control over
81
the
جيل أول
management of
المهاجرين
one of
اللي التقوا
the
بتعليم
main
البريد
actually
النكبة
post office.
وساهموا
And
في
he's
بناء
one
أنظمة
of the
المدينة
refugees
الجديدة
who actually continued their studies and helped
هون بدي أتوقف
rebuilt
عند مدرسة
the
رام الله ثانوية تأسست
the
بسنة
infrastructure of
52
culture and
كأول
the
مبنى
politics
عام في
and
شارع
politics
البريد
and
وساهم
economy
بخط
in the
تأسيسه
city.
بتاريخ
Now would
تعليم
like
البريد
to
المجاني
talk
للمدارس
about
خصوصا للبنات
the school,
تطبيق المشروع كان
the
بال
female school,
43
females school
البلدية
in
اشترت
Ramallah.
الأرض بال 48 بنفس الوقت
Ramallah
اللي اشترت
municipality
فيه
bought
مبنى
the
مستشفى
land
رام
in
الله وتم
1948. At the
جمع
same time,
تبرعات
they
لبناء
bought
المشروعين
the
بمدينة
land
رام الله
for
الجديدة
municipality, and they managed
المدرسة
to
اجت
receive
امتداد
donations from
لجهود أهالي المنطقة اللي هم
Ramallah's
المهجرين ببناء
dissidents
ما
abroad,
يسموه شبكة
living abroad,
مدارس
or
وطنية
immigrants
من
in the
بعد
United
الحرب
States,
العالمية
etc.
الأولى
To
ممكن نشوفها كمان
they managed to
بعلاقة
get
مع
donations to
مشروع
build the
إنشاء تعليم
project
الأهالي
of the
للسكاكين
school
بالقدس نشاط نخبة
and the
متعلمة
municipality.
مثل
You
خالد
can see
زويل
here
ونينا
the Ramallah's
ميخائيل
Girls
وخالد
Secondary
طوطح
School in 1950s
وهذا المشروع
with Janet
التعليم العام
Mikhail
تأسس
and
بعد النكبة
Khalil Tota and
مدارس
etc.
مدارس
And
معاهد الأنظمة اللي فتحت مجال
this
لطبقات أوسع من أهل المدينة
different
والقرى
cultural and educational
منهم
program
أخواتي
projects
درسوا بهاي
where
المدرسة
my
بالسبعينات
cousin, my
ومنهم اللي كمل
aunts
تعليمه برا
studied in those schools
برا
in
فلسطين وفي منهم
1970s,
كمل
and some of
تعليمه
them
بمعهد
continued its higher
المعلمين في
education
53
in the
بهذا السياق
Institute for
بلشت
Teachers that
تقوم
was
مدن
established in
البريد
1953 or
بعد
abroad.
النكبة
There we
بلشت
see
تلعب
that how
أدوار
small
اللي كانت
cities like
سابقا
Ramallah after the
تلعبها المدن
Nakba
الكبيرة اللي
took
القدسية
the roles of
في
bigger city that
ما
was
قبل النكبة
traditionally for bigger cities such
الملفت
as
أن
Jerusalem
المدرسة
and Jaffa.
كسرت الصورة
The
النمطية
school
لوظيفة
managed
البنات
to
كحيز مغلق منفصل عن محيطه ساحة المدرسة استضافت أول
broke the
مهرجان صبيان ب
stereotype of
62
as a
الثاني صار بال 63
closed
والتقوا
or
آلاف الكثير منهم
spatial
تابعة
structure.
للأنروا وحضروا حوالي
And
30 ألف شخص
it started, we
فبهاي
can see
الحالة
here the
بنشوف
Ramallah
كيف
Festival
المدرسة صارت
Soster,
مركز حيوي كمان في
and
السنوات
we can
المتقنة
see how the
وتأسيس كان
school became
جزء
a
كبير
very
منه أعضاء جمعيات خيرية وفرق كشفية
vibrant
مثل
space
سرية رام الله
and center. And many
الصورة
of the
الجميلة الخيرية
teachers in that
بنشوفها
school
هون
have
مديرة مدرسة
played a
البنات
role
تخرجت من دار
before.
المعلمات في
Here
القسم
we see
الثلاثينات
Jamili
وخلفها
played a
فيلا
role in
ألفريد
civil
كشك في
society.
مول يافا
Here you see
اللي
Janet
أعاد
Mikhail,
زيارته في رام
and
الله وطوير
Alfred,
هاي الفيلا
underneath you see
بالستينات
Albert Kishik, a photograph showing Albert Kishik,
أسفلها في
who rebuilt
لصقت
his city. rebuilt his business in Ramallah. Here we see Salti family. Raja Salti moved to Ramallah in 1950s after he was uprooted from Al-Baqa neighborhood in Jerusalem. He continued studies in the United States, and before his the end of life, he asked Hani Arafat, architect, to rebuild to build this or to design this villa, and he moved to live in that city in 1967, and it's considered one of the post-modernistic designs. And in front of it is the Atallah building in the 1960s. This Kishik and Salti and Atallah and others has established this
طبقة تجار نقلوا حياتهم وأعمالهم ومقتدراتهم لرام الله وكانوا بفعل تجارتهم
residential approaches. You see here where different businessmen from who became refugees from the coastal cities became and rebuilt their businesses with connection to postmodernic with the different postmodernic approaches with abroad with European architecture, etc. The end of the road, we can see the municipality. It's important to understand that within the small years, the municipality was a small council during the Ottoman era and have become a a modern, it became modernized and giving. It will end with the Freedom Monument in Tahrir Square. Sorry, not Tahrir Square, sorry. And you can see here the mural that was Isam Badr. He was the artist Isam Badr who designed the mural and designed the mural behind the municipality of Ramallah, and he was studied by other. I would like to end with some words from Mahmoud Shkhair describing his memories in Ramallah in the late 50s and 60s. And he writes, back then, despite Ramallah leading a simple life, it did not keep her from accumulating more and more traits that make up a true city. Ramallah was adorned with the annual music festival, restaurants, hotels, parks, theaters, small and big companies and factories, live links, and different factories and live links with their people in the diaspora, and just the right amount of openness and freedom. However, once again, the June defeat arrived to destroy many dreams and ambitions. Thank you.
شكرا لنا على العرض
Thank you, Rana, for yours and Ranim words. Your study will continue to Abdul Rahman with an endless alleyway, the old city of Nablus and the practices of survival and resistance. Okay, God bless you, everybody. Thank you, Faik, for this beautiful introduction, and thank you, Hamad, for inviting me, and thank you, everybody, for those two talks. Maybe my talk will be a little bit violent. It was very nice how to see the Palestinians are becoming very beautiful. Here we see how the people are trying to preserve the city within the context of different military invasions. The issue is our ability as Palestinians to take accountability, to take agency. I would like to start with this picture. I think many of you saw it, which is part of the Kushner-Witkoff program of Gaza after the war. It is for the first time a colonial side that talks about the urban design of the city as part of the problem that they are facing and that they are fighting against. So before, as you see, there has been always, the city have always been an obstacle, but it was you know they dealt with it with some kind of diplomacy, but they always thought that the city was part of the problem, and they always thought how can the city be a tool aiding in controlling the population, and that might explain part of what we see today going on in the refugee camps in the West Bank, where they are opening streets and demolishing houses and buildings in order for the army to take control over these refugee camps. Of course, this that's not a new thing by the that's practice is not new to by the occupation, and it happened in Jenin. They demolished more than since 1938, demolished more than 3,500 buildings as you know, as a consequence of the Palestinian revolution. How they deal with Gaza? They don't stop taking C-section operations in direct operations in the city. They are now starting dealing with the city as part of, or the influential part of the problem. But they are but they deal with the city, the control of the city, and obsession. Today I'm going to try to explain to you why the old city and why this refugee camp and why this urban fabric is becoming under threat. I'm gonna start talking the early ways of the old city of Nablus, from where they experienced the Israeli military invasion in 2007, and the army, instead of entering through the roads, it used the houses to enter to the city. They would demolish from house to house, and the army invaded the city from house to house. But that's a picture. I'm not going to go into why or what happened. And you can see the zigzag is going, where they went in. That's an area from refugee camp. Therefore, they do not recognize the roads, the upcoming roads. They want to take their own roads, or to make their own roads, and therefore they enter from house to house and come to places that they use as military stations, or they use it as strogger houses, as they called, or control houses, where they would put a sniper air or sharpshooter, or a place of control, or monitoring or surveillance observation point. I'm gonna talk about how the steadfastness of its inhabitants, of the Palestinians, were managed to capacity to continue their lives in the face of the aggression. And I had six in my my PhD. I had three stories. One of them is called The Three Shelters. It's curfew, let's play, the collective kitchen, home examiners, and etc. All stories we would put them introduction. We were put into the spatial recognition, and where it's in order to get the spatial recognition, first of all, we would analyze who are the people, who are the characters, the main characters in the story, and of course the people who talk. But I had the family. I didn't have the specific people, but I had, main characters, a group of main characters and families, and I had to explain the stage, even if the story took place in a house, but it's part of a fabric, as part of the different movements that happened there. And then I go to talk about key buildings that were part of different stories that we manage. Or the second scene, the story includes also second scene is different scenes. On the left, we have how the space is being used every day of their daily life without curfew when there's no curfew or no invasions by the occupation forces. And of course, on the right side, there is this how the space is used by the IDF. So what is what is colored in the black? It's a use that has not changed between everyday routine life and the invasion, the time of the invasion. What is on in red? It's a new practice or a new change in the use of this place because of the occupation or the invasion. What is underlined in red? It's something that was stopped because of the invasion, and therefore there became new practices. So this helped me understand how the space is used and what is the limits of a space of use. So I'm going to give you one story. The family, the IDF occupied the building in front of this family. Number one is the building that the army occupied. Number two is the family's residence. Number three is the place the family went to the first time, and then number four is, so if we look in cross section, this is the building the Israeli army took control of. They took all its people and to the first floor, and they used the different windows in the building for snipers, especially the roof. And now you see, number one, the people used their kitchen as a safe room or a shelter because it's the furthest away from the sniper point, but because they were very afraid of the invasion by the army to this. So therefore they took to the second floor, number two, where his sister, the sister of the owner of the house. These places, they were part of one building, one home, but because of the when they managed, but when the parents died, they managed to, the hires split the two buildings. So after, in the second day when they went into his room, the army actually invaded his house to take control and use the windows as for snipers. Abu Firas and his sister were afraid that the army would discover the secret door, so they had to move to the building number 3. What aided them in fleeing there was this fabric and architectural fabric and cultural fabric and community fabric. So Abu Firas called somebody called Al-Hakim. Al-Hakim was somebody in this neighborhood and with a group of people, a group of youth from the area. So they understood that this family was about to evacuated. So they talked to somebody called al-Kharbu, who was, so nobody was afraid for him. And this person usually knows every entry and every exit of the buildings, and because he's from the neighborhood. So he went to Abu Firas and his sister, and he managed to take them to the house of their neighborhoods. The second story, it's curfew, let's play. That's a story of refugees. So if you know that if there are people, men in the city, in the house, the Israeli army invaded building number 1, and from there they wanted to enter building number 2 in the old city and take control over building number 3, which is a corner street. And here they can take control over one of the entrances of the old city. The children and the youth of the city and the neighborhood managed to make a building play or a playground for them in building number 4. And you can see here where the army entered, where took everybody and put them in the first floor or ground floor, and From there, they enter this building which is seeing on this cornerstone. This is the building that they wanted to take control to take control over the intersection of the cities. And here, Salem, Hajja Salem, used to live, to stand, to sit in this, and talk to Samira, her neighbor, and as old women do. So Samira saw that in that day Salem did not come, and she called Salem. So she understood that it's most probably that the army has invaded their house, and even though the army invaded this space, and of course they have control over this building here, and the lines of sights is taking control over the whole city, but because of these two buildings over here and here, that it has become an opportunity for the youth of the city to put, to make a playground for them where they could play football, and where the old people would, meeting place of there. Back then there was no helicopters and no drones. And of course, when there was no helicopters, it was safe to play in this area. The collective kitchen is a story of a woman. I call her Ali. It's a place where the women of the neighborhood would come together and make one salon of one of the families to a kitchen that would cook for everybody who was immigrant, who was uprooted, who was evacuated from their homes. So Amali, because she knows all the neighbors, she knew what everybody has in their house. You bring the gas gallon, you bring different things, and it was the time of Akub. So they started cooking Akub. Akub is a very famous is very famous it's very famous dish in Arabic. So we have here the family over here. He is the owner of the shop that is on the other side, and though this building or this family house is not part of the same area, but you have here one small window for ventilation, and it's about 40 centimeters on 40 centimeters. One of the kids over there said that this ventilation window goes to the kitchen and you can go through. So that's what's happened. That child managed to take that ladder over there, and that's how they started taking things from the shop to the neighborhood kitchen. The window to a new life is a similar story next to the building number 1, where the army took over control of the road that could let everybody leave from. The family managed to leave from building number 1 to building number 3, 2, and then to number 3. What happened is the family used to live in that room, and they heard the Israeli army digging before they blow up the walls. So the alleyway was full of clashes between resistance fighters and IDF. But her child, their mom told her that this abandoned room I used to play in, and they called their neighborhoods through the window of that abandoned room, and managed to get away from one room to another, from one building to another. And here we can see the way the army took to take control of this village, and the Palestinian resistance fighters who helped each other and helped the population to evacuate houses. And there's somebody that I call the leader. This leader, they did a complete evaluation of this building, evacuation of the total neighborhood from the civilian population, and the guys gave cover from through this window, and here and from this side people managed to run away from one side to another. And you can see here the The path that the ISAF took, the army took, it in its invasion, that as well, that is only, it is only separated by a small wind.
مسار للجيش الإسرائيلي كان محتل أحد السيباطات في هذه الجهة ومحتل أحد السيباطات أو أحد المناطق
Was
في
separated by a
السيطرة
small wall.
الشرع وكانت
Here
دولية
we can see that
مع أن المستشفى الميداني موجود في هذه المنطقة إلا أنه لا يستطيع أحد أنه يسحبه
this is the field hospital, but the people, there was somebody who was injured over there, and they took the injured person through the houses to get to the field hospital. Of course, they entered from between from a house to house, a room to room, from courtyards, from bustans, and to take this path to reach the field hospital because the army had cut the way. So this fabric was part of the communal fabric because, as you see, the social structure is composed of several social groups that meet, communicate, that exchange information in specific purpose. It was many of them were different groups, all youth of the mosque, youth of the neighborhood, youth, women. They were actually the aid of these people, and within these different communities, you can see that's a photo that's a name. I said the gatekeeper, the leader, or Harbu, the street smart, Ali, Al Hakim, the midwife. In Nablus, the midwife is somebody that knows everything. Never mind if he's a man or a woman. He might be, the barber shop, the owner, or the shop owner. So he has all the information in order to enable the paths for leaving the place or for getting away. So what is the army actually demolishing in this? Is not demolish the buildings, but all this community or social fabric that helps the people in steadfastness and enables the people to continue their lives during invasion. So the destruction of the buildings or the space, it's not only the spatial destruction, but also destruction of the social fabric of the resistance. And therefore we see that you see why the why the Israeli media always concentrate on the destruction of the social fabric. Everything, the analyzation you see, you were talking about, it's not Nablus city, but it's an imagined city. I called her Sham city in order to make visualization to these stories in a place without being reused by the IDF, because there are people here and places and spaces that would most definitely be reused by the IDF, etc., etc. It's a simulation of a city through this. It's an imagined city through the simulation of the Nablus, of the old city of Nablus, based on studying of the grammars of this old city, old town of Nablus, which I brought from the archives of the Ottoman courts, and studies on the urban renewal of the city, and therefore we got the city of Sham. And thank you very much. Thank you, Abed. God bless you, everybody. Good job. I'm thinking.
بالمحتوى اللي لثلاث محاضرات ورا بعض
I'm thinking three.
التعامل الفلسطيني مع الحياة اليومية تحت الاحتلال بمثالين كان بعد حصول
Three lectures, one after another, that dealt about this special use of the city, one after the other. And Abed, for really, I have many questions, questions that we can start from. And of course, we're open to taking questions from the public in Q&A. But before the questions of the public, I would like to start with a few words. This relationship or this
بين لحظة المواجهة وبين ما تلا المواجهة من جهة، وعم بفكر بالعلاقة ما بين التنين. يعني في
I'm thinking
محاضرة
about the
حنين
difference or the
حكت
relationship
عن
between the time of
العلاقة بين النضال
confrontation
والعودة
and
للحياة
after the
الجديدة
confrontation. So
بعد
Hanin
إعلان
talked
الوجهة
about
الثانية
the
نضال
relationship between
للعودة للأراضي المحتلة.
fighting to return to
المحاضرة
routine life
نفسها
and routine
تمحورت
and
حول
fighting for
يعني
to
محاولات
return through the occupied land.
العودة للحياة اليومية.
So
بس بحب
the
لو
attempts
نفكر
to
كمان
return to
بالعلاقة
routinely
مع
life, to
المحاولات
regular life, I
التحرير
would like to
والعودة
think
اللي
also
كانت
about
بالقدس
the
بهالفترة.
relationship
بشكل
of
عام
and the
يعني
attempts for
العلاقة ما بين
liberation and
المحتلين اللي
return in
عملت
Jerusalem at the same time. The
اللحظة
relationship between
اللي
the
حكى عنها
two
عبد الرحمن
times that we're talking,
اللي
the
حكت عن
time that we're
الآلام
talking
وعبد
about,
الرحمن.
time about that
فهذا
Abdurrahman
من جهة.
talked about, and the
من
time
جهة
that
تانية
Hanin
برضو
and
بفكر
Lana talked about. So
بالفاعلين
that's one from one
عرفت
side. I
بمحاضرتك
also think about the
ركزت على
actors,
الكاركترز
the
والشخصيات من
players.
خلالهم. وإذا
So
بنطلع على الكاركترز فعليا 3
Abdurrahman, you
محاضرات
consider
حكت عن
the characters,
شخصية.
and it's 3
ممكن
lectures
طبقيا كان
talked
في
about
فرق
different
واضح
characters. Of course,
بين
there might
هالشخصيات.
have been difference between
وبرضه بحب
these
لو نحكي شوي عن هذا الجانب.
class difference between
يعني بنفكر
between these
بالفاعلين
characters
اللي
and to
موجودين
think
في كل
about
مدينة بكل مثال من هاي الأمثلة.
the different
وكل
actors
مثال
that
مين
shaped
الفاعلين اللي
the
ممكن ما
space
حكى
or the
عنهم
spatial
بهاي الفصل.
of the
يعني
city
في
and the
محاضرتين
actors that
حنين
we did not discuss
نعمة
in this.
برضه
So
لانا جودة وهن
also
كانوا
Hanin Naamni and Lana
أكثر
Judi and
على
Reem
الإليت
Ayyad, they concentrated
تجار
more on about the
الاقتصاديين
elite, about the
الطبقة
businessmen,
الوسطى
about
برضه
the bourgeois,
اللي كان واضح إنه
the
في
middle
سبب
class
لتشكيل
and
المدينة وهو
upwards
بسبب
that
قدراتهم
played a role
المادية.
in
وكان في
shaping the city
تواصل
because
أو في
their
ارتباط مع
economical and
المجتمع
financial
المحلي كبلدية وممكن
ability.
حتى مع
And there was
الحكومة.
also connection with the
ففي
municipality and
مثالين
maybe even the
رمالة
government.
والقدس
In those
شفنا
two
الدولة
examples,
كفاعل
Ramallah and Jerusalem,
والحوثيين
we
أو
saw the
البلدية
government
كفاعل.
as an
وبرضه
actor
شفنا النخبة
and
كمان
local
كفاعل.
authorities as
بقصة
actors
عبد
and also the
الرحمن
elites, the local elites
شفنا
as an
عم
actor.
بيألف
In the
سكان
story of
المدينة
Abdurrahman, we saw
في نابلس
the
كانوا هم
people,
الفاعلين.
citizens of
وبسأله
inhabitants
هو
of the old
كل
town,
قصة
old city
مين
in Nablus
الفاعلين اللي
as the
ما بحكي
actors.
عنهم
And
وإيش كان
now I
دورهم
ask,
في
which actors
القصة الأوسع للحقبة اللي بتناقش فيها.
are not shown in those
نقطة
stories
ثالثة
on your
بس لحظة بجوز في
in your
إزعاج
lectures
لما
and
لساني
what's
كان
their
بيحكي.
role in the bigger picture. Sorry, I might
ممكن
there was
أوقف هون
some
ممكن
I can
أوقف
stop
هون
here. You know what? I
وبعد
can stop
يعني
here.
لو نتناقش في هاي النقاط
And
وبعدها
maybe we
نحكي
can discuss these
Q&A من
points and
الحضور
then you
وممكن
take
بعدها
Q&A
أرجع
from
بنقاط
the
إضافية.
public and then we
اللي
can go
بحب
back to
يتفضل
different
ممكن
questions
يبدأ.
if you want to start.
إذا في مجال بقدر أبدأ.
I can start if it's okay.
بصراحة يعني ملاحظتك
Honestly, you're on points. Your points are very right. If you want to talk about the role of the actors, the stories that I showed are only samples. There are a lot of more actors. I talked about the different shapes of relations. For example, the relations between actors, the social relations between the different actors. For example, the neighbors, the families, the shop owners, etc. But the families are connected to different bigger social circles and larger social circles. So that's true that this Harbu, the smart guy, can take the different things to the people or help them, but he gets, for example, the help or the aid comes from the aid distributor. So there's somebody who's in connection with the larger or bigger contacts. So basically, I went to the basics to see from the base how this steadfastness works, because the sequence upwards usually used, understood, and was more clear, and was always discussed in media and different studies, and from the people who studied the city, from Eyal Weizmann and the others who studied the invasions by the IDF. So he talks about the system, but I concentrated more in my PhD study and what I published about the doctorate PhD study dissertation. I talked about three kinds
في
of
المكان اللي هي سميها
social
peace
circles,
related
which, as I call them,
affiliations
peace-related
connected
affiliations or
to
space-related affiliations that are connected, that are a result of the space.
شكرا عبيد.
Actually, thank you, Abed.
ممكن أنا أضيف شكرا للجميع على
I would like to
شكراً
thank everybody and thank you for the
اللي
questions.
بدي أبدأ فيه إنه
What I want to start with is that a lot of what we
هو
had here, we showed here, is connected to many of the sources from back then. So the history of the Arab Jerusalem between 48 and 67, almost there are no references, almost no articles about it. So I started from a place from the protocols of the Arab municipality and its may a lot of its cases and files, and it shows how the city was built back then. But many of the different protocols. So, for example, Arif was the mayor in different places. He was a member of the city council, and at the same time, he was writing about the main references about the Nakba back then. So these references, these sources, we don't know what was not written in those protocols. So we need also, we always take these protocols very carefully, very careful. And a lot of other articles, a lot of sources were hidden and were not open for public view. And also we need to talk about the political side. Jerusalem was denied, municipalities in Jerusalem and the West Bank were denied, according to Jordanian law, to deal with political issues. So many, so political issues, political discussions were not there, were not shown in these protocols. So how this shapes the return or talks about the return to the lands that were under occupation back then. So though the Jordanian authorities denied the political activity in the public spheres back then and denying the municipalities becoming political centers, still there were different places. Of course there were petitions and protests and etc. You asked about actors. Of course we cannot talk about all the actors, and what part of one of the limitations of these references is that it talks about different classes of the city. There were different classes that were actually negotiating the public space, each from its own side. But of course, there was also a role played by the student movement. Not only high education students, but also high school students had a role. We're talking about also students that participated in the protests, and also the poor who demanded the city and made a lot of protests asking the city to aid. They said, we don't have money to pay, so how can you aid us? How can you help us? There are different also other places. Of course, tourism played a very big role in shaping the political and social structure of the city. We can talk about that tourism back then. I would like to mention that the story every time because, for example, when people were coming from villages to sell in the city or have only the donkeys to use as a sales point, so that made tension all the time, and it was written all the time in the newspapers. Why some people, some class of people use donkeys for etc, and how the other classification, how the tourists would frown upon the use of donkeys in the cities. That's part of the postmodernism we're talking about. And of course this discussion has continued, and it's how different classes looked to the city and saw the city in different eyes. Of course, tourism also shapes the vision for the future. And due to the limitations on movement of Palestinians in that era, up to 1964 and the establishment of the Palestinian Authority, Palestinian Liberation Authority, PLO. There were different ways. For example, the Nakba was not mentioned as an official act until the end years of the Jordanian mandate from 1964 and to 67. And we see that's a lot of connection also. A lot of context. Why the Nakba is memorized in places away from the city center, while in other places it is held commemorating the Nakba is commemorated in the city centers. Also, tourism is not only financial or economical. So there's always they always concentrated how the tour guides should talk about Jerusalem as a city under that suffered the Nakba. So it's not only let's come and see the different developments and the old places, but also there was importance to the municipality and anybody who worked in tourism back then has emphasized on the narrative of the loss of Jerusalem or the Nakba back then. There's a lot to talk about, but I'm going to leave the opportunity to somebody else right now.
شكرا.
Thank you,
أظن إنه
Lena.
يعني إجابة على
I think
سؤالين
to answer
ما بنحكي
who's the
عنهم.
actors
أظن
that are not
بمجرد
mentioned, I think
ما
the minute
الواحد
you
يأطر فكرة إنه
you frame the
نحل
idea that we're talking about
هو في
the
يعني بالضرورة automatically بيكون في تهميش
refugee
أو
space,
عدم
there's
الحديث عن التهميش الموجود في
automatically
اختيار كمان الشارع
marginalization or not talking about of the unseen fact actors.
بالضرورة كمان
So the space also connects you to the actors in this space time. About when talking about class, I think there is an elite that we showed in our lecture about Nazlet al-Barid, but even there were middle class also, that the lower middle class, higher middle class, what maybe we don't mention it a lot, but it's a phenomenon that people who started from nothing, except for their social capital, and manage to build themselves up and become very large victims. So, and that's one of the issues that we talked about in our study, as studies as a kind of social movement upwards, and also the building of the city, the structure of the city aided in that. I also think that there is more than one social class or group that we were trying to show its activity in this urban space that we dealt with. Of course, there's a duality of refugee, not refugee, but also, of course, so there's the duality of village and countryside and city. And there's also we talk about everything that the community or the society that started to rebuild or reshape itself as reshaping El Bira and Ramallah as a center for the internal immigration or a center for higher education and work. Of course, the same as Hanin said. Of course, there's not a lot of references. With many of the sources that we talked about, we can't talk a lot about the unseen actors in official files, but the space that we were talking about, we were already very acceptable for the places that are whose
بشوف الأهمية في إنه الدراسات تكمل
present in it or is not. I think in the end that the different studies can't cover everything, but can actually
مثلا في أماكن
complete
أخرى
each
اللي هي
other. So what
12
happened in
صار
Ramallah in the you would ask what happened in Ramallah during the
شو
50s
صار
and 60s,
بالستات
but what also
المحررة
happened in
شو
El
صار
Beiri,
باللبنان
what
شو
happened
صار
in Jerusalem, as
بنابلس شو
Hanin
صار
said, what happened in
هو
Jerusalem and
بناء
Jaffa
وسائل
and
تساعدنا نفهم
Lod.
الأشياء
So it's building a
بطريقة
mosaic
أوسع
to help us read everything in and
ونفهم
see the bigger
محيط
picture
جغرافي
and
واجتماعي
understanding geographical and historical and social subjects in a continuous way.
أكيد وهو
Of
يعني
course.
هذا
And
السؤال
I
أو
think that I asked this question from
يكون
my
في أصلا
idea
لمحات بينت يعني حنين لما قالت عن
from
شكاء
the so when
الدكاترة
Haidin talked
والنساء
about
بخصوص
the doctors and
الغناية
women
على باب العمود
were actually
فهل هي
complaining
الشعب
about the
نفس اللي
coffee
كان
goers,
دور في
coffee shops
الانهيار
goers
ولا
in Bab
التنسيق
al-Amud
نفسه
in
هو اللي مسبب كل
Damascus,
هالشيء
Damascus
فبنفس
Gate.
الوقت
So
بدنا يعني
there's a voice that was not heard
نشعر انه شو الجانب
in the
الثمري
archives. So I'm not saying talking
للريسيرش بس
about
بالاخر يعني
the
كانت
side that
التجربة
the
باعتبار
research
دائما
has
في بحث معين ضمن توفر المصادر بركز على جانب
has
وجانب ثاني
neglected, but
ممكن نغيره مع انه
maybe
تجربتها
sometimes we
بفلسطين نفس
overlook
الظاهرة ونفس الواقع
places or
فهي كان
different
سؤال أكثر
sections
كفرصة
that
للإضاءة على
shape
الجانب اللي بعدم موجود بالبرزنتيشن
shape
ولكن
the same
أخذتوها خلال
space
عملية
spatial.
البحث بس
I was
ممكن
asking about
كل
some
اللي
things
طالب
maybe that
قادم
humanity
بالأسئلة
did not see
في
during the
عبد الرحمن أنت
during
سألت
the
لماذا
beginning,
المسؤولية
but
بيد
then
المخيم
you understood it in
برأيي في هون
during
سؤال
the study.
وأظن لنا كمان أنت يعني
Abdurrahman,
تعاملتي
you
مع هذا
talked
السؤال
about, I think,
في
Lana, you
في
talked also
أعمال
about that
بحثك اللي
city
هو
in your
الرسمي
city
واللامسي
in research about
وكمان مرة بدي أرجع
the
لنوع ما
official and
هي عشان
non-official,
تعكس علينا محطة
the
البحث
immigrant
ومحطتكم
and
كطالب
refugee
معي
and not
لأنها
refugee.
ممكن تكون وسيلة لمساءلة الظواهر اللي عم نطلع عليها علاقة الرسمي واللا رسمي كمان
The
مرة في
relationship between official and
خطاب
non-official
إلي
in
في
the
المحاضرتين
space
عن قدس ورام الله كان
that was
تركيز أكثر على الجانب الرسمي وفي نفس
you
الوقت
you
كان
concentrated more on the official
التركيز أكثر
side
على الحياة
in
ما
two of
بعد
the lectures and the life
الواجهة
after the
والعودة للحياة اليومية
moment
بنحكي
of
سياحة وبنحكي مدارس
conflict
وبنحكي
or
مستشفيات إلى آخره من الجانب الآخر
or
كان في عندنا
confrontation,
البلدة القديمة
and
والمخيم
on the other side
اللي
we had the old
والحديث
city
عن
or the
مرحلة
refugee
المواجهة
camp,
بس
and they talk
نقدر
about the
يعني
moment of
نسقط على هاي
confrontation.
الجهتين كمان مرة
So we can talk about those two
سؤال الرسمي
sides,
واللا
the
رسمي
question
والسؤال
of the
هل
question
فعلا
between official side and non-official side.
العلاقة هي ثنائية بهذا
How
الجانب
is
ولا لا
this
وهون
the
يعني بنرجع كمان
relationship
مرة للسؤال اللي
dual?
سألوا
Is
عليه
it a dual
برضه
relationship or not
وجه لعبد في
between this side and
الكيو&اي
this side?
بيقول
And also
لماذا
the Q&A,
البلدة القديمة
there was a
والمخيم
question
وجه
there
مشترك ما بينهم
that ask why the old
طبعا
city
السؤال
and the
للكل بس يعني
refugee
كل حدا من
camp
جهته
and what's the connection
تمام
between them and what's common
هو
between
سؤال
them.
كثير مهم واجابته كانت
It's very important
في
and
المحاضره بس انا ما
it's
انتبهت
very
انه
important
احنا لما
question.
عملت الريهرسل
I
وقعدنا
did
نحكي
not
انه
and I did not
وكنا نص
see.
الثاني ولكن
It
انا
was supposed to
اكتشفت
be, the
مش
question
بس
was
ظاهره
supposed to
ومش
be the
بس
second part
كمزاج
of the
ولكن
lecture.
هو
It
التشابه
doesn't
اصلا بالطريقه
here in the
الجغرافيه
fabric of
الموجوده
the
غير
urban fabric,
الرسميه
but
ولكن
it's also in the
الجهات
reshaping of
الرسميه
the
لا
place in an
يمكن
unofficial way. But
التعديل
unofficial way
او بدون محددات وقواعد
um,
انا اللي اشتغلته كيف
does not
ربطت
mean
ما بين
random way.
مدينه نابلس انه
I
انا
did
رحت شفت كيف الناس بنوا هاي المباني من خلال الاتفاقات
simulation
اللي
to
صارت ما
Nablus
بين
city,
الناس او
and I
الاعتبارات اللي
saw
صارت
how the
ما بينها
people
وبين الناس
rebuilt the
اللي
city
انشأوا هاي
in
المدينه
through
طبعا هذا
agreements
الاتفاق
between the city or
والاتفاقات
even uh, um,
والتوازن اللي
objection from the
خلقه الدور
city. So
الشرعي
then
في
you
كلها مدونة بوثائق المحكمة الشرعية في مدينة نابلس
the balance that
وبتوضح
the
يعني آلاف الحجج واللي
court
منها
through the
استنتجت
court
هذا انه
actually
كيف تم انتاج هذا المكان هلا طلع معي مجموعة
through
من
the
القواعد
balance
بتقول
that the
مثلا
court
اول
and
قاعدة
the
انه
judges
الناس اللي
created in the
بتعيش
city,
بالمنطقة
I
في حرية
managed to see
التصرف
that
فيما
in the
يملكون
beginning the
كحقوق
people
وحريات وهذا جزء
had
رهيب جدا كيف
very
الناس
free
تتصرف في المخيم
options
الجزء
to
الثاني اللي
build
هو
shape the
كان
city
اللي احنا بين
to shape the
المتشابه
place in the
اللي هو انا
same
اشتغلت
way
فيه
any way
شغل
they
انتاج
wanted.
المكان
But
داخل
that's how
المخيم وهو يشبه
the
احد
refugee camp
الطرق
was
في
shaped in the
انتاج
beginning.
مباني
But
في
then
المخيمات انا ما في حدا
it is
بيقدر
there's a
يستطيع
reshape of the
انه
buildings in
ياخذ
the
هاي
refugee camp because
الاتفاقيات
nobody can build
هي
up
برضه
without
بتعتبر
taking into
المكان
consideration
مشاكل الجانب
its
الثاني
neighbors,
مثلا او
his
الطريقه
neighbors or her
الثالثه او الجزء
neighbors.
الثالث اللي
So
هو
the third
الحفاظ وحمايه
idea, it's part
الملكيه
of a whole.
فانا سكان البلد
So
القديمه
the citizens
بالداخل
of the
المبنى
old
هو
city would
مجموعة من
consider the
العناصر
building a
المعمارية اللي
group
ممكن تعمل
of
هالشيء
different
وأربطها
architectural elements
بالجوهر
that I
أو حتى
can
أهديها
rent or give
لجيرانهم
away to
وبالتالي
my
جيراني
neighbors.
ممكن
So
يركبوا
therefore,
على
my neighbors
سطحي
can,
ممكن يعلقوا
for
تلفزيون
example,
على حيطي
go
من
up my
خلال
roof
الاتفاق زي ما
or
حكيت
put something on my on my wall
في كتير
through
ما فيش
through
يعني مش بس
through
حسنية.
different agreements. So
هذه
sometimes it's also in through rent to the neighbors, and that's what made the different
السيستم سميته هوريزونتال سيستم. الهوريزونتال
complexity in the old city, and this is something that I call the horizontal system, where the law is applied applied on everybody and used by everybody. The same thing when me and Alessandra studied in Amari refugee camp, and our students also analyzed the reshaping and reconstruction of the builded structural urban space in the city and different refugee camps. Even though building is not official, it doesn't mean it's random. So the official law actually makes you abide by numbers, through numbers. So your relationship with the official was different before, and the reshaping of the city in a common way creates a different social fabric, because everybody needs to live with each body or the others in the same place, and the only thing that decides to build or not to build, to demolish or not demolish, is the social agreements and social relations, not the official structures or the official plans from the cities.
شكرا عادل. لو ننتقل باقي المتحدثين ونحاول نختصر شوي في الإجابات علشان نوصل
شكرا كتير فايق على السؤال.
Thank you, Faik, for the
أنا
question.
ممكن أفكر بما أنه تصنف البحث في خانة الرسمي بشكل أو بآخر، يعني في كمان ثنائية الرسمي واللا رسمي بتشوفها الواحد في أثناء البحث نفسه. يعني زي ما كانت تحكي حنين عن التعامل مع المصادر الأولوية، من أكبر التحديات كان إنه
one of the biggest
الموازنة ما بين الظهور في الوثائق الرسمية وشو بتحكي الوثائق الرسمية وبين الشهادات
challenges was the balance between what is available in official files and official statements and what is the
وصار بدك تضل تستنى انه الوثائق الرسميه
oral memory.
تاكد لك
You need to sometimes you need to look for
موازنه بين هدول الشغلتين، وصعب صراحه، صعب كتير يعني انه الواحد يختار ويوفق ما بين هدول الاثنين، خصوصا ل نوعية التصنيفات وكيف تتعامل مؤسساتنا مع الأرشيفات زي مؤسسات البلدية خصوصا، وصعوبة الوصول لها كمان كان كتير صعب.
It was very hard to reach also the official statements and official files from the city and the municipality. I'm gonna be very quick. This differentiation between official and non-official, we need to understand that after the Nakba, it wasn't the same way that we see it today, or look at it today. The municipality, yes, it's an official organization, but the municipality after 1948, I called it a refugee municipality because it lost the building. The municipality lost, or its resources. It had only 18%. So rebuilding until it became an institution and took this shape. Of course, it took different things or rebuilt on procedural stuff, and it needed to use a lot of different unofficial channels. So this division, we need to take it under its old back then, how it was seen back then. We have 11 questions in the Q&A, and we can take it to methodology and questions about the future of. So if we talk about methodology, there's a question considered to Abed that I think it's general, but it's talks how can I'm sorry, I can't hear him very well. There's a question, another question about what are the opportunities and what's the limitations of the idea of simulation when we're want to study a social phenomenon.
وفي سؤال
And
عند
there's a
الأستاذ
question.
سامي
Let me reach it.
استكمال لنفس الموضوع كيف
It's a
يمكن أن
completion
تتحول
of the same
المحاكاة من
idea
أداة متخصصة
how
يستخدمها عدد محدود من
simulation
الباحثين أو
can
المبرمجين
become
إلى أداة متاحة أكثر للباحثين
a
في العلوم
tool that
الاجتماعية
is
والتخطيط.
in the use of or more available to
السؤال الأخير
researchers.
اللي بيقول إلى أي مدى يمكن
And a
اعتبار
last
الدراسات
question,
التي
how
تولدت
much
من
can
عناصر
we
عمرانية
consider
ومكانية محددة
articles
مثل
about
الشارع أو البوابة أو الزقاق مساهمة في إنتاج منهجيات جديدة
architectural
للقراءة
structures
التاريخية؟
as an
ما
alley,
هي
a
المقاربات
city,
المنهجية
road,
التي يمكن
or a building?
استخلاصها من هذه
What
الأعمال
are the
وترويجها في أبحاث ودكتوراه
methodological
تتناول فضاءات وسياقات مختلفة؟ فهذه هي أسئلة المنهجية عن كشف المعلومات في سياق استعماري وخطر زي سياقنا، عن فكرة المحاكاة، دورها
methodological approaches
ومحدوديتها،
that we
كمان
can
تعميمها
talk about,
وإيحائها
and
إلى
also
دراسة ظواهر معمارية أو فضاءات معمارية محددة وتعميم هاي الدراسة. بتخيل الأسئلة بجوز
I think the
زايدة موجهة
questions
لعبد، بس أكيد
are to
كل
Abed,
المشاركين ممكن
but also
يجاوبوا.
everybody can chip in. Every
تمام
researcher and
يعني هي
speaker can
فعلا
chip in.
أسئلة مهمة
Of course, it's very
نحاول
important
نجاوب
questions,
عليها خلال
but I would try
البرزنتيشن. بس بالنسبة لعلاقة
interpretation.
البحث مع شو ممكن احنا ننشر او ما ننشر، شو ممكن نظهر او ما نظهر، هو فعليا علاقة يعني كثير صعبة. وهي كانت
It's
يعني
of course
مفترض
very
رسالة الدكتوراه كان بعد سنتين، بعد ما صار عندي
after
الشهادة
2 years
انه
after
اني
in
بلش
my
مشروع جديد
the
وبحث
PhD
جديد، او اني
it's
لمحت
research.
بطريقة
It was
اني
either I could
اقدر
start a
فيها
new
مشروع
project
يكون
or
مختلف.
find a way
وهون
to
اخذني
talk
سنة
about the
ونص
project
تقريبا اني
in
انا
easy way.
اعيد
It took me a year and a half to
كل
reshape
الاتجاهات
the
والقوانين
city
القديمة. وهذا
through
الطبعا مش
old
موجود في الخارطة تبع
the old
تبعي، وتقريبا
laws, and it
لسه ما
took
إلى
me a lot
بالي
of
شهور.
time and
وكيف
between
كل
6 to 8 months
اللي بدي
to
أحطها
think
على
of
ماتيريالز
how
خيالية
or study
حتى
how
ما تكونش
this
مؤثرة على
imagined city or
المجتمع أو ما
imaginary
تكونش
city
مفيدة.
would
فهو
not
تقريبا سنتين أخذ
affect
مني
the
بس
social
لأجهز
fabric. It took me about 2 years only to talk about the
التعميم.
relations
وهو طبعا
of
كمان كل
the
الاسماء يعني وهميه، كل الاماكن اللي بالبي اتش دي وهميه،
image
ولكن هناك يعني
illustration or
محاولات
illusory
للتعويل على
efforts.
قواعد
Of course,
الماركس
the
اوف ذا قصبه وحطيناهم، وكانوا اصعب جزء من البي اتش دي تبعتي انه يتم
the
فهمه.
simulation was based on
وكمان
customs
كان
of
انا
coercion
لدراسه
and based
اللوكاليتي
on
والتوقيت
study
وكمان
of
التوجيه
morphology very
الاستراتيجي.
strictly.
وبالتالي
And
بالاخر قدرت
therefore, in
اغطي
the end, we
طبعا
managed. And I
احداث
would
مشهوره.
say,
يعني انا
like,
برضه
until today, we are
المحاضره
facing
اصلا
a
كان
problem.
بالاول لازم يكون عندي
The
دكتور،
postdoc was
ولكن
supposed to
الفكره
be in
انه
quartet
من
in the
في
beginning, but the
صار
idea
يوزنج
is
داتا، فانا كنت
who
انا
uses
في
the data,
البدايه
who takes
كنت
the data.
بحث
So
ولا
I
اشي
would
في شو
prefer
الرو داتا
that
تبعتي.
my
وبالتالي رفضنا نكمل وما قدرنا نكمل لانه هو
my
بطريقته هو
supervisor
عشان بس
to take
الرو
it,
داتا
but we
تبعتي
couldn't
وما يحط
continue
وما يدخل.
because my
فبالتالي
supervisor
احيانا
wanted to
لازم
see my
نوافق
raw data
انه
and I
العمليه
denied
تعمل
that. I
حتى
did not
مش
agree.
احنا مش امام
So
الواحد دكتور
sometimes you
ثاني
need
امام
to
بالنسبه
take
للمجال. على كل حال
to take into
اللي
consideration who you
اللي هي
work with.
فعلا
So
فيها
the
مجهود،
limitations, of
وهي
course, there are limitations on
عشان
the
هيك
raw data, but the idea of
اخترنا الفكره.
simulation is
انا
not
اخترت
an
الشات
idea
جي
that
بي تي
everybody needs
اساسا
it.
عشان انطلق
I
مكان
needed it
عشان
because
انا
to
اعمل هذا،
reshape or
ولكن
to
هي
reconstruct the
المحاكاه
place
نفسها
and the
بتعطينا
space.
جزء من
But
المعرفه اللي احنا
simulation
ممكن
gives us
نعرفها.
the knowledge
لانه
that
هو
I did not
كقرارات عامه
know.
للمحاكاه كان ما
So
عرفتش
even
لسه
though
المواد
I
القديمه
decided
صارت.
to do this, if I
ففعليا
didn't
هذا
know
المحاكاه
how
هي
I did do the
المعرفه
simulation,
هي الجزء اللي خلى هاي
I
المحاكاه
would not
تنجح،
get to
والشيء
the
اللي اخذ له
knowledge.
الاهم.
The
فبالتالي
main
انا
the main
بشوفش
issue
انه
is the
فكره
knowledge,
المحاكاه
not the
ضروري
simulation.
تكون
Therefore, I don't think that
accessible.
the simulation need to
اعتقد انه
be
المعرفه
accessible
نفسها
and
هي
available to
تكون
everybody.
accessible
I think that the
للكل،
knowledge
ويكون
might need to be
حطها
accessible to
للناس في
everybody
المجتمع
and to give
بطريقه
it to
مفتوحه،
the
وكمان
people
تكون
and to the
لهم
community
الطريق انه
in an
يعني
understandable
يقدروا
way
انهم
and tell
يحصلوا
them
على
how
هاي
they can
المعلومه.
reach
وكمان
this
كيف انها تصير
knowledge.
يعني من فكره محدوده لفكره
How we
اشمل.
can
فهي
move from a small
غير
idea to a
ممكنه،
more
هي اداه
broader
يعني
idea.
فقط،
It's
يعني
so
احنا استخدمنا
it's a
كاداه
tool. Yes, it's
وحسب
a tool.
استخدامنا
I
لها
use the
فهي
simulation as a tool, and
بطريقه
the way you
معينه.
use it, and it's not a very
والمعرفه اللي بتنتج
constraint.
عنها اذا ما كانتش مبنيه على معرفه علميه، فما بنقدر نستنبط منها معرفه غير معرفه علميه
And
لانها
it's not an
خارجه عن
accurate
هندسه الشام
decision.
تبعتنا. ما
So
بيقدر
if somebody wants to come and
يستنتج كيف
study
انه
El
تنبني
Sham, the
القضيه
simulated
كانت
imagined
لانه
city,
شاف
he
الشام. هو
can't
لازم يقرا
get an
الرو داتا
understanding of
التفاصيل
how
اللي انا طلعتها او اللي
the
كتبها
old city was
كبرامج
built.
من
He
هذه
needs to read
الفكره.
the
فبالتالي
raw
هي
data
بتنتج
that I
المعرفه.
published part
والمحاكاه
of
هي
in my
فيرتشوال
paper.
ايديشن
So the simulation is only visualization and the tool. I think I understood. I managed to answer the simulation about the question about simulation, but maybe about the future and the reality, I would leave to my fellows here. Thank you.
بس أنس بقدر أجاوبك برضه يعني
But Anas, if you want, I can answer also. Not because you are Anas, I did not want to answer you.
طيب حدا بيحب يضيف أي شيء على
Anybody
السؤال
else would like to
الموجود؟
add something about the
إذا لا
mythology?
ممكن
If no, we
الأسئلة
can
اللي هي بتحكي
move to
عن
questions that
أسئلة
deal
عملية
with
نحكي عن إعادة الإعمار وكيف
about
يمكن
rebuilding
إعادة تشكيل النسيج. هلا
and how reconstruction and
الموضوع
the
يعني
reconstruction
بيرجع النقاش
of the
للعلاقة بين
urban
البيئة المبنية نفسها والعلاقات الاجتماعية اللي
fabric.
بتحويها. وطبعا كمان مرة يعني السؤال الاستفزازي نوعا ما والباينري
The provocatory question and binary question, dual question between official and non-official is only to take you, to provoke you a little bit. The question here is talking about the fabric, our role to save and the fabric. How do we rebuild according to the laws of rebuild and shaping and
وإلى آخره. السؤال من وحي مشروع عن إعادة تشكيل الفراغ المكاني في
planning
بشروط
and
إعادة إعمار
schemes.
عدد كبير من المباني. في سؤال يعني مرتبط اللي هو بيقول في سياق ما بعد
There's a question close in the context of the post-colonial urbanism,
المخيمات الفلسطينية التي تتعرض حاليا للتدمير والتهجير.
Urbicide. How can we vision the future of the refugee camps after the reconstruction and rebuilding? How do we build them as a new spaces? I would like to start now. Ranim or Lana or Hanin, if somebody, any of you would like to start answering.
يعني أنا ممكن أحكي باقتضاب بس
I would like to answer shortly,
يعني بحس
but I
مفيدة
feel
الرسمي ولا رسمي لبدء النقاش. بس إذا بدنا نفكر
it's
نقصد
the issue
برسمي
of
ولا
official or
رسمي، هي
non-official is
منطقة فاضلة عن
it's
السياق.
good to start the
وشعوري من
discussion.
الأسئلة إنه في
But
فهم
I think
للرسمي إنه هو
sometimes
عملية
official is
منظمة
understood
ومرتبة
as
كتير
a very organized
واللا رسمي على إنه هو عملية
clear
بديش أحكي عشوائية
cut
بس أكثر ديناميكية.
structure
فأنا
or operation
أعتقد من اللي
or
شفناه
procedure
بالأرشيف
with non-official as more dynamic. But we've seen from the archives that the official path is not really in that way. There's a lot of negotiations between different municipalities and the families and the people who are building and the constructors itself. It's a long negotiation until the owner of the house or the one who is building, the developer, reaches its vision. And in the end, this vision is shaped by different elements and goes through different phases. And especially, we can say that in the beginning, it's not very clear cut as expected. And the issue of a negotiation needs to be present. I don't think there's a direct result or a clear result of different ways to do things, especially we're talking about different official and unofficial actors.
يمكن بضيف
I would like to add
ملاحظة عن موضوع
a comment
يعني
about
هذا الصفة اللي
the issue.
أخذتها
This
المدن الفلسطينية بعد النكبة. بتوقع إنه يعني
attribute, what I was attribute to cities. That's as Hanin said, calling it official or attributing official statement to it might be not unfair. I would prefer the use of civil and the municipality played a role as a civil society because considering it as the middle section and there's a higher level above it and in the big and under it there's a community, a society that it tries to organize. So in that time, in that era, I think it is closer to the bottom class or not class, sorry, to the bottom category, to the society, more than becoming closer to the government, the higher way, the higher level of governance. I think it's one way to understand the issue of official and unofficial. Lana, based on what you said, I'm sorry.
زي ما تقول البوشباك يعني منك ومن
based on
حنين
your
إنه
pushback
العالم
from
اليوم
you
مش
and Hanin
ديمقراطي
and
بس
Ranim on
عودة
the issue of
للسؤالين اللي عندنا
official
اللي
and
إذا
unofficial. But we would
بنفكر
like to go
بإعادة
back to our
العمر
questions. If we think
إيش
about
اللي عم تحكيه
reconstruction,
ممكن يساعدنا
rebuilding,
بالتعامل
how
مع
what you
إعادة
say can
الأعمار
help us
يعني
deal
شو
with the
بتعلمتوه من بحثكم أو شو اللي
rebuilding.
ممكن
What did you learn
يعلمونا
from your studies,
بشكل
and what
مريح
does it say
وفعال
about
في
the role
المرحلة
of the
التطبيقية يعني.
organizations and institutions,
يعني
official or non-official, civil or
الشرح
non-civil,
ممكن بجوز يكون شوي
as part
مختصر
of the
وفي
reconstruction?
كتير تسلسل لحتى
I
توصل
think it needs
الفكرة
a lot
في
of
كتير واضح بالنسبة لي بس
a lot of
إنه
explanation
كل واحد
to give you the
منكم
full picture
بإعادة
without
الإعمار وإنه في
misunderstanding.
فاعلين
It
كتر
needs you need to
وهدول
understand
الفاعلين
that there's a
كتر
lot of
جدا وفي
actors and
البلدان
a lot of roles,
المخطط
and
أقلهم
almost
يعني
the least
تأثيرا ونفوذا
effectful
وفاعلية
and the least
بالمقارنة
powerful
مع
are the
المجتمعات
developer
نفسها كيف
and
بتشوف كيف
the
بتعيد التشغيل
constructor
الفضاء نفسه في
in
دور
comparison
الإنشاء
to the
البلدي
communities and
وكمان
societies
بحسب
and the role
تصورات
of
هذا الشغل
municipality. And
كيف
again, if we're talking
بيقوموا
about
بالرسم
this
المدارسي
category,
إذا
that
البلدية
if
هنا
there's something that attribute
والبلدية أقرب
official or
لهذا
non-official statement to
المستوى
it,
اللي فوق
and if the
بيمثل
municipality is in the middle, is
السلطة
we need to ask if
البلدية
it's closer
بتقدر
to the
ترسم سياسات
government,
أكبر
the
ولا
people who are
عم
dealing
بتميل
with
أكثر
higher
لمستوى
policies,
التحت
or are they
هون
leaning
بشوف
more
إنه
to the
في
lower to the lower
أهم
level
خطوة
or level
لازم
category?
تصير هو
I
كل
think
واحد
the
يفهم
most
موقعه
important
وحجم
position
الصراعية
step
العالمية
that needs to be
لحتى يقدر
taken is
يكون
that
في
everybody needs to understand
يعني
its role
فاعلية
in
كبرى
this
وكمان
process
تحقيق
in order to achieve bigger role
للمطالب
and
والرؤى اللي
to
بيسعى فيها بالأخير المجتمع
achieving
إذا
the
تعرض لهذا
demands
الجانب
of the community that
بالبداية
was
لا
put under
يعني شو
herbicide,
بالأخير ما
under
في حدا
genocide, under
بيفهم
destruction, because in the end nobody will understand
التنظيم السابق
how
كان أكثر
this
من
previous
الزمان اللاحق
planning
للتنظيم
used to be
بالنهاية
more than the people who used to live under this planning
بضيف
development programs, planning,
إذا
etc.
ممكن مداخلة سريعة.
Any comment?
يعني
Just
هذا
a very
موضوع
fast
المصمم غير
comment.
الرسمي في
The issue
موضوع
of official and
الإعمار
unofficial in
هو
reconstruction
مش
and rebuilding is
يعني هو
not.
جدل كتير كبير،
It's
ولكن
a very
جدل هو بيحتاج الجميع. واللي أنا شرحته عن
it's
المكان
very
القديمة
confrontational.
وإنه
It's
كيف إحنا
sorry,
ننتج في مكان أنا
it's very
شرحته هو
controversial. But
بالطرف
what
اللي
I
بحكي فيه هو
explained
بيتعلق في
about
إنتاج
the city
الأحياز في
is connected to
المجال
rebuilding
الحركي،
or reshaping
ولكن هذا لا يعني إنه إيش في
the
وصمة
spaces
المدينة
in the neighborhood.
العربية
It doesn't say that it
لأهدافه. كان
wasn't
في وصمة
official
ثانية،
in the Arab
كان اللي
city
بيحدد الشارع كان رسم، كان بيحدد الجامع
pre-postmodernism.
وين الجامع وين
Of course,
المحال
we
والمرافق
had
العامة، ولكن
planning
السوق
that
هو
showed
الرسمي
and
هو
decided
غير
on the
الرسمي
official
اللي هو
side
كان
where is
طرحك وغير
the
رسمي اللي
walls,
ممكن
where
يصير
is the
للرجل
mosque, where
بالمرأة
is
على
the
مستوى الأحياء.
schools, etc.,
وبالتالي حتى
etc.
المدينة
And there was a
المحلية
little
اللي
bit
كانت عليها
unofficial
مشاكل
on the level of neighborhoods. And even the city
وكان
under
هون زي ما
before
هو تقريبا
postmodernism,
أحياز
top
في
up and top down,
مخيمات
is
هيك.
almost the same as the refugee camps in these days. Thank you, Abed.
طيب ممكن ننتقل
We can
لسؤال اللي هو لدكتورة حنين.
a
بيقول
question to
شكرا
Dr.
جزيلا
Hanin.
على العرض القيم، لفت انتباهي حديثك عن قطاع
Thank you very much.
وخاصة الإدارة
I
التي
love
تسعى لإعادة
how
رسم
you
المدن بعد
talked
67.
about hotels
يوجد العديد من
and the
الدراسات
hotels that
والتحليلات
has been
التي تضع
attributed
رأيها
or
التي تشير إلى
specially
أن مدينة القدس يعني كانت
concentrated to
تاريخيا بشكل أساسي كمقصد
used
للاحتجاج.
by
كنت
journalists
أتساءل
after
هل تشمل
1948.
دراستك تطور
I would
القطاع
like to
السياسي
ask
في
if
المستعمرات العربية التاريخية
your
المختلفة
study
بما في ذلك ما قبل العام 48 وفترة الإدارة الأردنية وما بعد 67.
the
شكرا على
tourism development
السؤال.
under the Jordanian
قبل
rule
أحكي
and after
تأسيس عام
1967. I study mainly 48, between 48 and 67 and not after 1967. The tourism, of course, played a very important role. We can't talk about that era without discussing tourism as a natural resource of Jerusalem and rebuilding its economy. And of course, it did not rely only on religious tourism, but it took different shapes. So there were student groups, where high representatives, where their politicians who visited the city back then. So there were different ways of it is known that, for example, the icon, pop icon, Fairuz visited Jerusalem and wrote 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 about it in
طيب احنا معنا
the song
سؤال
of
هيك.
Jerusalem. We have still 7
ممكن
minutes.
إذا حدا حابب يضيف
If
يرجع
anybody
للسؤال
wants to add anything,
أو يضيف أي نقاط، أو إذا الجمهور بتحبوا تضيفوا أي سؤال في الكيو اي طبعا كمان مفتوح المجال.
أنا ممكن أجاوب
if
على
you want to
سؤال
add something on the Q&A, I would like to
بالنسبة
answer
لممكن
Anas how
محدد من على
to start from a
المشاركين.
places
أظن
to the
يعني ال
mythological approaches.
هاي الدراسات
I think
بتسمح
these
لتكثيف
studies
البحث
allows
في
intensification of
القدرة على
studies
التأطير
and the
وكمان
ability
تحديد
to
وين
frame
توقف
and
المصادر الأولية
to
بطريقة كتير
help you
فاعلة
find the
وسريعة.
the first
بشوف
main
إنه
resources
الواحد إذا اختار
very
مكان كتير
good
محدد
way.
إنه
But
طول
if you
الوقت
take a very
يكون في
specific
القدرة على
place,
التنقل
you need to have the
بين
ability
أكثر
to
من
move between
قياس،
different
وما
scales
ويعني
all
ما
the time.
ينسى إنه يكون شوي relational
And
في
we
فهمه
should not
واتخاذ
forget that
المكان
it might be a little
مربوط
bit
بظروف
relational,
أوسع من
how and the understanding how
وبحس
this
إنه
is
هذا
connected
الإشي
to
لازم يكون في
a
البداية مش
higher
في
and
النهاية.
broader
إنه طول الوقت خلالك وأنت
subjects
بتدرس شارع معين أو سوق أو
or
ما
context.
بعرف
So
حتى
when you
طراز
study
معماري معين عم
maybe an
يعني
architectural
ممكن
design
يكون شيء
throughout the
محدد من
city
ناحية
or a
مبنية
souk
منصوبة
or a market
بطريقة
or a
كتير واضحة
road,
من ناحية
a street.
typology أو من
So
ناحية
it would be very
بيئة
clear
تاريخية
sometimes
طبقة عمرانية
from
معينة.
topology
هلا وإني
or
بحس
from
إنه
a
جدا
historical
مفيد لأنه بتسمح
topology.
لك تتعمق كتير
Sometimes it helps you to go deep
في الإشي اللي بتبحث فيه من ناحية
in the issue
المصادر،
that you are
بالأخير
studying
بحس إنه
from the
هاي
different sources.
الدراسات
But in the end, I
بتساوي
think these
يعني
studies
بتصير قاصرة لما ما تكون من البداية
would not be
فاهم
sufficient
كيف تربط
if they don't
المصادر
understand
الأوسع، إن كان
from the
مكانيا
beginning
إن
how
كان يعني
to
جغرافيا
connect
إن كان
with
تاريخيا
broader
كمان،
context
كيف تقدر
on history
تموضعها في سياقها
and how you
التاريخي
can
وتفهم
frame
شو
it
صار
on the
قبلها وشو صار
historical context,
بعدها
understand what happened
وكل
before
هاي
and what happened
التفاصيل.
after and all these details.
شكرا
Thank
جزيلا
you.
لنا.
Thank you very much,
إحنا
Lana.
وقتنا هيك قرب
Our time
يخلص،
is about to end, so I would like to
بدي أشكر الجميع.
thank everybody,
إلا إذا في حدا عنده يعني
unless
شيء
anybody
مهم
has
يحكي أكيد لسه بتقدر.
anything important to add. You can add right now.
بس إذا ما في بدي
But
أشكر
if there
الجميع.
is
يعني
nothing
أنا
else to
برأيي
add, I
كان
would
في
like to
عنا
thank everybody. I
اليوم
think we had today
يعني 3 محاضرات غطت
3
فترات
lectures that
زمنية
cover different
مهمة. في سؤال إضافي.
historical. Yes, we have a new question.
أوكي لحظة. في سؤال إضافي بيقول مرحبا
There's
جميعا.
a
شكرا
second
على العروض
question.
والمداخلات
Thank you
المفيدة
everybody
للأجزاء
for the
والتقسيم
lectures. I would like
والتفصيل.
ask about the
ولكن ما
classification,
علاقته
official and
بالإضاءة
unofficial, what is
بماذا يسمى
connected,
الخطوط من الأعلى رسمي
what is the
أم
relationship,
الرسمي
and
بحد
why the
ذاتها بحاجة لنقاش.
I think the
هل يوجد
naming
جانب
itself
رسمي
needs
للمتحول
to
اللا رسمي الذي
be
هو عندما
discussed,
مرتبط بالثقافة والأرض والإنسان،
as the
أم
naming
نراه
is
على
considered
اعتبار رسمي وليس العكس؟
to
أنا
be
حاسس إني عملت
so.
مصيبة
I
بخلق
think with this
الأرض والله
duality
بس بس إذا حدا بده يضيف أي
binary
كلمة
classification, as I made
قبل ما
a
نسكر،
catastrophe.
وإحنا لازم نسكر، بس
But if
نحن
anybody would like
هيك
to
صعب
answer or
نصير
add about that,
أنا راح أضيف
I
سؤال
would
على
like to ask.
السؤال
I would like to
إنه
ask another question about
وهو
on this
أكتر
question.
نقطة إنه
It's a
في
point
تعامل مع
more
الرسمي على إنه في
when we
له
deal
دلالة
with the
إيجابية
official
ولا
as
رسمية ولا
have
سلبية يعني، بس بدي
a
أحكي إنه
negative or
العكس.
positive
بس
context.
بدي أحكي إنه مش
I would
بالضرورة
like to say
هاي
that it
إنه
doesn't have to be
الرسمي هو
negative. Official does not
بغض
have to
النظر
be
إنه
negative
ربط
or
السلبي والإيجابي
or
بهاي التسميات
connecting
بيشبه
negative
مع
negativity
إنه
and
ممكن نمشيها.
بس
positivity
أنا إذا بدي أحكي بصراحة
these
يعني
namings
أنا
or
في عندي
these
تساؤل
names.
حقيقي، وبغض النظر
It's
تسمية
unfair.
رسمي ولا لا رسمي، إنه
I really
مثلا
I have a
حقوق
question
البلديات
here.
إيش كانت
For example,
تعمل
municipalities,
لمواجهة
what they
احتمال
used to
اجتياح
do
القدس في الحرب
to
نفسها،
counter
أو بلدية
the
رام الله
invasion
بكل
of
تفكيرها بالمشاريع السياسية
Jerusalem, for
المستشفى
example, in
بالربط
the
بين
future,
مستشفى ومدرسة
or the Ramallah
داخل المنطقة.
municipality.
هل كان في
How
أي نوع من
have
التفكير
there
بأنه
been
أرض
any
آمنة مثلا أو
idea
حقوق
or
المدنية
have they
كانت
thought
تحمي
about any planning
للاحتلال؟
that might
طرح
help
مشاريع من هالنوع
deter the
صراحة
invaders
على مستوى
or
محلي أو
a
ممكن في الوطن
security
المحتل، أو
building,
مرة
for
كان في ضابط
example?
في جيش التحرير طرح الموضوع، ضابط فلسطيني
There was a
بالسياق
Palestinian
السوري،
officer
وفكرة
who
تخطيط
called
مجتمعات
it about
أو
it about
يعني
planning
قرى حدودية
communities
إلى
or borderline villages as part of the security method. The question about official and unofficial, I think we cannot talk about not about the role of official roles, official actors as a role. So that's a point that was in the background of the question that I asked.
بس بدنا ناخد بعين الاعتبار إنه تاريخ
We need to take
البلديات
that
في
the
سلطات
history of
متعاقبة فوقها
in the history of
نفهم إنه هي
municipalities. We need to
مستواها
understand that
دائما
it's the level,
مستوى
it's located on the
عمودي
middle level,
يعني صعب نختزلها بأنه هي
and we
رسمية
can't talk
كمان
give it an official role because there are also more official roles above her.
يمكن هو أنا بتفق مع كريستين وأنا
Maybe I agree with Christine with everything said. I do use informal and non-formal and this binary classification because it would lead us into a problem. But the new book of Bilal Sharash about Fahmi Kanaan, the mayor of Nablus, his notes. So he shows in his works the official, non-official, the popular, non-popular. So it would be the same role, the same person, when formal and informal, in confronting or facing the occupational version. I did not call it formal or informal in my study. I called it horizontal because everybody, popular or non-popular, official, non-official, use this system. Thank you very much. I was trying to understand if Muhammad al-Carmel, if we need to end or not. I think we should end. Himmat, thank you everybody. Himmat now invaded the talk. I think we need to end. Thank you, Himmat. And thank you everybody, all the speakers. And thank you, Mad al-Carmel, for inviting us, me as and the speakers and everybody and the attendees for your questions. We usually hope for more time, and I'm sorry if I did not give enough time. The attendees and the participants, I hope that you saw all the questions. You can look into the questions and bring answers and answer. He asks speakers to answer the questions that are in the Q&A. Thank you very much and goodbye. Thank you. Goodbye.